Chapter 1155, I like you, elder son, we have memorized the cultivation technique you have imparted to us. An hour later, Elder Su clasped his fist and reported to Zhang Xian. Destroy those books then. Zhang Xian replied with a wave of his hand. Elder Su and the others nodded, and with a powerful flick, the secret manuals disintegrated to ashes before scattering into the surroundings, as if they hadn't appeared in the first place. Elder son, where can we find you in the future? We wish to repay the favor to you. Knowing that it was only a matter of time before the envoy of the founder would have to leave, Elder Su couldn't help but ask. The other party had granted them a second life, and no words could possibly be sufficient to express the gratitude they felt towards him. Where to find me? Zhang Xian shook his head. There's no need for you to seek me. If I have any matter that I require your help for, I'll come and find you. Then. Elder Su hesitated for a moment before asking. May we have the honor of knowing Elder Son's true identity? This way, if you have any instructions for us in the future, even if you aren't able to meet us in person, you can simply send a messenger to us, and we'll brave through even the flames of hell for you. This. Zhang Xian was intending to refuse that request of theirs as well, but looking into the expectant eyes of the poison masters before him, he found himself hesitating for a brief moment before eventually relenting. All right then. Actually, my true identity is the principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, Zhang Xian, S. Butler. However, I am a very low-profile person, so I hope that you can keep this matter a secret. Principal Zhang's butler? I have heard of Principal Zhang. He's famed to be a once-in-thousand-years prodigy, and despite his young age, he was unanimously nominated to become the principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. So you're Principal Zhang's butler. Understood. Senior son, rest assured. We will never speak a word of this matter to another soul. Upon learning of Zhang Xian's true identity, the poison masters quickly nodded their heads excitedly. All right, let's leave the underground prison. Zhang Xian said with a wave of his hand. Nodding, Elder Su and the others began walking out of the door. After confirming that they had all left, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. He reverted back to his original appearance before slowly heading out as well. By the time he left the underground prison, the poison masters had already been brought back to the combat master hall, leaving behind only Hall Master Xing, Wu Shi, Luo Qiqi, and the others. Zhang Shi. Seeing that Zhang Xian was fine, the crowd heaved a sigh of relief before quickly gathering around him. I have already talked to those poison masters, and they will heed the commands of the combat master hall in the future. Zhang Xian smiled. Principal Zhang, thank you for your words of wisdom. Hall Master Xing clasped his fist and thanked. Words of wisdom. Seeing the delight and gratefulness on the other party's face, Zhang Xian was bewildered. He had noticed Hall Master Xing's reluctance regarding the matter when he first proposed it, and he had been worried that the latter would abruptly change his mind halfway through. Yet, after returning from a short trip to the underground prison, the other party was suddenly thanking him for the matter. Just what in the world had happened for the latter to change his mind so swiftly? You're being too polite. This is part of my responsibility as a master teacher. Even though Zhang Xian had no idea what was going through Hall Master Xing's head, humility had always been one of his dominant traits, so he quickly replied so. On the other hand, seeing how humble Zhang Xian was, not taking credit for his action at all, Hall Master Xing's respect for the other party deepened. How in the world could there be such a selfless person in the world? Was he the living embodiment of altruism? Principal Zhang, may I know what you intend to do after this? Wu Shi asked. I intend to pay a visit to the Painter Guild and the Appraiser Hall to take the corresponding 7-star examinations so that I can be promoted to a 7-star master teacher. Zhang Xian revealed his intentions without any reservation. He was originally intending to head to the Appraiser Hall, but he was suddenly called here by King Zhongqing on the way. Thinking about it, he couldn't help but feel that it was a huge waste of time. Does Wu Shi has any matter for me? Zhang Xian asked. To be honest, I was thinking that if Principal Zhang doesn't have any urgent matter at hand, it would be good if you could follow me to the Master Teacher Pavilion to discuss the results of my investigation. The results of your investigation? Wu Shi nodded. According to what Zhang Yinqiu said, the master teacher who had duped him of the intelligence goes by the name of Chen Zhe, who happens to be the direct disciple of Vice Pavilion Master Tian as well. I have already arrested Chen Zhe, and he's currently imprisoned in our Master Teacher Pavilion. If Principal Zhang is free now, I would like to invite you over to meet him. This. Zhang Xian was slightly hesitant. In truth, he wasn't too interested in this matter. Since even Vice Pavilion Master Tian himself had been imprisoned, it would do for the Master Teacher Pavilion to slowly interrogate the both of them. At this point, it didn't really matter whether he were to be involved in the matter or not. Just as he was about to turn down Wu Shi's request, the latter suddenly smiled. Actually, there's no need for Zhang Shi to rush into taking the painter and appraiser examination. To tell you the truth, there will be an appraisal convention later on, and if you are free, I can bring you there along with me. The head of the Appraiser Guild and Painter Guild should be attending as well, and if I were to introduce you to them there, it should make things more convenient for you on their side. Appraisal convention? What is that? Zhang Xian asked doubtfully. From time to time, when new artifacts of unknown backgrounds are uncovered, a convention would be held over them so as to appraise the artifacts and see if they could be fixed. While it may appear to be an event for appraisers, over the years, it has gradually evolved into a high-class social event where most renowned and influential figures in Qingyuan City would attend. Wu Shi replied. Zhang Xian pondered for a moment before nodding, all right then. He had departed from the Combat Master Hall early in the morning, and after the events at the Terpsichore Guild and King Zhongqing Manor, it was already in the late afternoon now, nearing evening. Rather than fumble his way into the guild and waste more time, it would be far more convenient for him to first meet the heads of the Painter Guild and Appraiser Hall for the matter. Hearing Zhang Xian agree to the matter, Wu Shi smiled in delight. Great. I'll be leaving first to make some preparations then. I'll see you at the Master Teacher Pavilion later on. After which, he turned around and left. Shortly after, Hall Master Xing and the others bade their farewell as well, leaving only Zhang Xian, Sun Chang, Luo Qiqi, and Yu Fei around. Zhang Xian turned to the other three and said, "You all should return to our accommodation at the Combat Master Hall." Yes. Knowing that he had caused a huge trouble this time around, Sun Chang quickly nodded obediently. "Teacher, I have some doubts which I would like to ask you. May I know if it's convenient for you?" Luo Qiqi bit her lips as she looked at Zhang Xian nervously. "Of course, feel free to ask anything." Zhang Xian replied with a kind smile. Noting that Luo Qiqi had something private to ask, Sun Chang and Yu Fei took their leave. After confirming that there was no one around, Luo Qiqi set up an isolation barrier around them before asking, "Teacher, the affairs today have left some doubts in my mind, and I hope that you can answer them. I have been paying a close look to the earlier conflict. Vice Pavilion Master Tian and King Zhongqing have attempted to pin a crime on you using underhanded means, and I do agree that they should be punished for it, but is it really alright to frame them like that? Wouldn't that be going too far? Isn't it against the values preached in the way of teacher?" She had known Zhang Xian ever since the time she had spent in Huanyu Empire, and for the longest of time, she had viewed the latter to be a role model for her. From saving her in Wu Yangzi's underground chamber to risking himself to rescue Yu Fei to venturing into the dangerous Cloud Mist Ridge to tame all of the saint beasts, all of these matters only served to build the noble and selfless image of the young man before her. With time, his image within her grew bigger and bigger, and she even began to think that he was just like the world's teacher, a true master teacher through and through. Admittedly, he did resort to some schemes from time to time, but those were minor incidents, and they always concluded in a positive end. But everything she had witnessed today had overturned her view of him. No matter what, Vice Pavilion Master Tian was a 7-star pinnacle master teacher, the vice head of the Qingyuan Empire Master Teacher Pavilion. To directly oppose a respected elder was already an infringement of the formalities and values that master teachers believed in and embraced. As such, she found that her faith was starting to waver. Instead of replying to Luo Qiqi's doubts directly, Zhang Xian asked her a question: what does being a master teacher mean to you? Master teacher: as teachers, we serve to clear away doubts and bring mankind to a greater height of prosperity. As role models, we strive to conduct ourselves honorably, displaying desirable values for others to emulate. Wrong. Your interpretation is all wrong. Zhang Xian shook his head. Wrong? These are the commandments that all master teachers must learn to recite. There's no master teacher who doesn't know about it. Luo Qiqi frowned in incomprehension. It's true that master teachers serve as teachers and role models to mankind, but we shouldn't neglect the fact that they are humans as well. Zhang Xian replied. Humans? As long as we remain human, we will have our own emotions and thoughts. That's simply our nature. Kong Shi didn't create the Master Teacher Pavilion to churn out batch after batch of mindless puppets. Formalities and rules are there to guide, not to dictate. In situations where following rules and formalities go against one's conscience, it's fine to break free of it and do what one deems to be right. Zhang Xian said. Master teachers should never aim to blindly follow existing conventions. That's what it means to stagnate and wither. Only when we open our mind and question freely will we be able to bring mankind to further heights, and that's what it means to be a master teacher. This. Luo Qiqi fell into deep thoughts. I have once met a cultivator whose father is a master teacher. From a very young age, he has deeply respected his father and heeded the latter's words obediently, devoting his entirety to cultivation. He had always regarded his father's words to be the absolute truth. However, his father has never managed to achieve a breakthrough before his death, and this matter had left a trauma in the cultivator's heart. Deep within, he felt that since his father was unable to achieve a breakthrough, there was no way he would be able to take the final step forward either. Under his father's looming shadow, even when he has accumulated sufficient jinqi and knowledge to achieve a breakthrough, his attempts still ended in failure. Zhang Xian said. That is what it means to have a fixed mindset. While we are master teachers, we are students in the long road of life as well. As students, we should expand our minds and doubt what we see and hear instead of blindly heeding the words of those who have come before us. Take the incident today for example. It's clear that Vice Pavilion Master Qing is at wrong, so why should I just take his words for it and accept his verdict? He has a far higher standing than me, and I have no way to going against him directly. As a result, I can only resort to other means in order to stand up against him and protect myself. Then what if a formidable master teacher were to use rules and conventions to force me to accept his point of view? Luo Qiqi asked with a gleam in her eyes. Follow your heart. Zhang Xian replied with a smile. No matter how formidable a master teacher is, can he be any more formidable than Kong Shi? In fact, even if Kong Shi were to order you to kill a man, claiming that it's for the welfare of mankind, does that mean that you really should do it? Ultimately, you shouldn't allow others to dictate your actions. Look into your conscience and determine what is right and wrong for yourself. As long as you disagree with the other party's words, you are always entitled to the right to reject his point of view. In the first place, if the other party is using rules and conventions to force you into submission, disregarding your own personal thoughts, he's already breaking the very foundations that make a master teacher. Since that's the case, there's no need to uphold formalities with the other party either. The light in Luo Qiqi's eyes grew brighter and brighter, as if realization had dawned upon her. All right. In the end, those tricks are just means to protect oneself. I can't say that they are honorable, but sometimes, there is little choice but to resort to them. As long as you don't go overboard with them or utilize them to cause harm to the innocent, they aren't fundamentally at odds with the teachings of the Master Teacher Pavilion. There's no need for you to think too much into it. Zhang Xian shook his head. It was clear that the other party had cornered herself this time around. Master teachers shouldn't be inflexible individuals who only knew how to abide by the rules. Different circumstances called for the application of a different set of standards, and master teachers should know how to flexibly adapt to the situation whenever it was required. Luo Qiqi was a talented individual, but she was simply lacking in the adaptability that Hu Yaoyao and the others possessed. I understand. Upon hearing the explanation, Luo Qiqi's eyes lit up. She raised her gaze to look right into Zhang Xian's eyes and said, "Since teacher has already said so, I think that I should follow my heart as well." Teacher. I like you. Zhang Xian. Chapter 1156, Zhang Jiuxiao. The sight before Zhang Xian turned dark, and he nearly fell to the ground. He thought that the other party was truly conflicted and lost, and yet, who could have thought that the other party was actually preparing a trap for him to jump into? All along, he had always been the one to scheme against others, and never had he thought that he would actually be outwitted by a young lass to drop a bunch of philosophical questions first in order to lead him to tell her to follow her heart so that she would be justified to say what she wanted to say afterward. Zhang Xian cleared his throat and replied, "I like you too. I like everyone from the Xianxian faction as well. If I didn't like you, why would I accept you as my apothecary student?" To be confessed by his own student, how embarrassing. Teacher, you know what I mean. The type of like that I am referring to isn't that. Luo Qiqi stared at Zhang Xian intently with her large eyes as she spoke. You should return to the combat master hall first. I still have matters to attend to. Right after saying those words, without giving Luo Qiqi an opportunity to respond, Zhang Xian turned around anxiously and flew in the direction of the master-teacher pavilion. Ha ha ha. Watching the sight, Luo Qiqi couldn't help but burst into laughter. Her teacher had always been a composed person. This was the first time she was seeing him in such a fluster. You were the one who told me to follow my heart. I might address you as my teacher, but we have never undergone an official acknowledgement ceremony. As long as I'm not your direct disciple, this isn't a problem at all. Luo Qiqi muttered as her lips curled into a ravishing smile. In the master-teacher continent, it wasn't appropriate for a student to harbor such thoughts about her teacher, so for a very long time, she had been suppressing her true desires. However, after her teacher's counseling, the dilemma that she had been facing finally cleared up, and a beautiful smile surfaced on her lips. She might have addressed Zhang Xian as her teacher, but since they hadn't gone through an acknowledgement ceremony, the teacher-student relationship between them had yet to be officialized. Since that was the case, it wasn't against the rules for her to court the other party. Phew. That was a close shave. After flying for some distance, Zhang Xian came to a halt and wiped away his cold sweat. While his actions may seem unprincipled time to time, he would never dream of laying his hands on his students. This was his moral boundary as a teacher and a belief he held firmly onto. Are kids nowadays all that brave? Zhang Xian shook his head. It took many, many days of hesitation before he could build up the courage needed to confess to Luo Ruoxin, and that young lass actually just directly said that she liked him to his face. My gosh, it was fortunate that he had fled quickly. Otherwise, wouldn't he die of embarrassment if she were to say anything more than that? The world sure is becoming more and more open. Zhang Xian looked at the sky and remarked deeply. He had always conducted himself properly so as to not get into any messy relationship with the ladies. Yet, who could have thought that he would still end up being placed in such an awkward situation? Just the thought of it left his head hurting. How was he to face Luo Qiqi in the future? Forget it, I won't think about it anymore. I should head to the master-teacher pavilion first. Driving his soul depth, Zhang Xian calmed his mind down before continuing on his way to the master-teacher pavilion. At that moment, however, he suddenly noticed a beautiful figure swiftly rushing towards him. Zhang Shi. You Fei. Didn't you return back to the combat master hall? Zhang Xian was taken aback. At this point, Yu Fei had already switched into a crimson dress which embraced her body tightly, fully displaying her alluring figure. It must be said that this fiery-tempered princess truly had a beautiful physique. It might pale in comparison to Hu Yaoyao, but her perfectly shaped hips which extended down to her slender legs was truly an eye to behold. At the same time, perhaps it was due to her intentionally concealing it in the past, but under the tight embrace of her dress, her chest looked far more voluptuous than before. At this moment, her appearance was one that would leave the gazes of others lingering upon her. "Zhang Shi, there's a matter which I need to talk to you about," Yu Feier said with bit lips. "Cough cough, I still have matters to attend to, so I'll talk to you some other time. Farewell." Zhang Xian waved his hand hastily as he prepared to take his leave. "This won't do. Since you are willing to listen to Qiqi's words, why won't you listen to mine as well?" Yu Feier harumphed unhappily as she swiftly grabbed Zhang Xian's arm. This. Cold sweat burst from Zhang Xian's head. No matter how low his emotional quotient may be, the very fact that the other party had specially changed her dress up and returned for him was more than sufficient clue for him to figure out what the other party was going to say. "I'm only going to say one thing to you. I'm willing to follow you wherever you go in the future, even if it's to the end of the world," Yu Feier said. She was one with a fiery temper, and she usually dealt with matters decisively as well. Nevertheless, it took all of her courage in order to say those words. "I see." Hearing those words, Zhang Xian was pondered for a moment before replying, "Very well, acknowledge me as your teacher then. As long as you become my student, I'll bring you wherever I go. Otherwise, you would only be able to follow me as my maid." Yu Feier glared at Zhang Xian furiously. "Ah. Is that a no? I guess we'll just have to forget about this matter then." "Alright, I still have things to attend to at the moment, so I'll be taking my leave first." "Who?" Once again, without any hesitation, Zhang Xian pushed his Heaven's Path movement art to its very limits and disappeared on the spot. "Humph." Upon seeing Zhang Xian left, Yu Feier's tightly clenched fists finally opened up once more. With a smirk, she muttered, "I would like to see who will you choose, Qiqi or me." "What the heck is this?" Fleeing to a remote alley, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. Just one awkward situation was intolerable to him, and they just had to come in pairs. It was truly too pressurizing to face the confessions of others simultaneously. If not for the recent rise in his soul depth, he might have just collapsed under the immense mental stress and lose his mind. It won't do to drag this matter out for too long. I have to find Ruoxin soon and show them that I already have a girlfriend so that they would give up on me. Zhang Xian shook his head. Being too outstanding also came with its troubles too. How vexing. He really had to proclaim his attached status soon, or else, if everyone were to come confessing to him one after another, even a person of his soul depth wouldn't be able to take it. Just fending off the two of them took everything that he got. If more were to come, he wouldn't have to cultivate anymore. The next time I meet any ladies, I must accept them as my disciple in advance so that they wouldn't have any opportunity to harbor such thoughts. Zhang Xian thought as he stroked his lower jaws. Making his way forward as he contemplated over this matter, he soon arrived at the Master Teacher Pavilion. The Qingyuan Empire Master Teacher Pavilion was even grander than the Combat Master Hall. The majestic and towering building seemed to signify the dignity and standing of the number one occupation on the Master Teacher Pavilion. Even from a distance, Zhang Xian could see many master teachers walking to and fro the building, and countless cultivators had gathered in the area in hopes of finding a suitable teacher to guide them along. Zhang Xian walked into a remote alley and swiftly switched into his master teacher robe and pinned on his master teacher emblem before making his way into the Master Teacher Pavilion. Upon seeing the 6 brilliant stars gleaming on his chest, there was no one who dared to stop his passageway. Every single person that he walked by bowed to him respectfully. While 6-star master teachers might seem nothing much to the topmost echelon of Qingyuan Empire, they were still formidable existences to the eyes of the common populace. Not to mention, a 6-star master teacher as young as Zhang Xian, given sufficient time, was bound to become a 7-star master teacher as long as he didn't die prematurely. "Zhang Shi, can I have your autograph?" I don't have any paper on hand, so why don't you sign it on my innerwear instead? Hey, don't cut my cue, I was the one who came first. Zhang Shi, just sign over here. Scram to one side, Zhang Shi is mine. Shortly after walking through the doors of the master-teacher pavilion, Zhang Xian suddenly saw a huge group of girls rushing in his direction. Zhang Xian's face warped in astonishment. There were plenty of idol-chasing crazed fans in his previous world as well, but this was the first time he had seen someone asking to have an autograph signed on her innerwear in public. Everyone, I understand your agitation, but I am an upright person, and I am already attached too. Pardon me, but I won't be able to fulfill your wishes. Besides, as a master teacher, I hope that you will focus on my inner beauty instead of just my appearances. Zhang Xian waved his hand and said, but before he could finish his words, the group of ladies had already rushed by his side, heading out of the master-teacher pavilion. Lunatic. One of the ladies in the group stopped for a brief moment, turned to examine Zhang Xian from head to toe before harumphing in disdain. After which, she turned her flabby face back forward, and shaking her millstone-sized bottom, she charged forward along with the crowd while shouting, Zhang Shi, wait for me. In the direction where she was charging towards, Zhang Xian soon spotted a white-robed young man standing not too far away with 7 stars gleaming on his chest. The white-robed young man looked at the crowd apologetically and said, pardon me, but I still have important matters to attend to at the moment. I'll sign autographs for you all later on. But we want it now. The group of ladies exclaimed resoundingly. All right, all right. Despite the demanding attitude of his fans, the white-robed young man waved his hand patiently to calm them down. After which, he gracefully flicked his hand in the air for a few moments, and a floating name appeared. Suspended imagery. He is a 7-star painter. Zhang Xian's eyebrows shot up. A painting could be divided into various grades: reality depiction, spiritual canvas, infused intentions, breathtaking verisimilitude, spirit creation, spirit wisdom. Those who were able to produce works at the level of spirit wisdom were already worthy of becoming 6-star painter. Up to 6-star, painters would require a paper as a medium for them to express their creative conceptions. However, upon reaching 7-star, they would be capable of producing their work in mid-air, painting their picture and words without anything to serve as a medium. And the fact that the young man was capable of writing in mid-air showed that he had already comprehended the 7th level of painting, suspended imagery. Zhang Jiuxiao. Zhang Xian read the name that the white-robed young man written, and his lips suddenly began twitching. It turned out that the young man had the same surname as him, so naturally, others addressed him as Zhang Shi as well. How embarrassing. Indeed, there were plenty of people in the world who went by the surname of Zhang as well. He wasn't the only Zhang Shi in the world. Just that his name went by a single character of Xian, which meaning could be interpreted as only levitating a few inches off the ground. On the other hand, the other party's name is Jiuxiao, reminiscent of a rock soaring in the 9 heavens. The conception behind their names was simply far too different one. While Zhang Xian was lamenting over how shallow his name was, he examined the 2 words, Zhang Jiuxiao, closely. Those 2 words carried a unique beauty and aura around them that seemed to draw one into a trance, rendering their minds incapable of anything but to appreciate the immensely beautiful words before them. This was an ability that only 7-star painters could wield. Alright, I'll just leave a single autograph here, you can decide its allocation amongst yourselves. I still have some urgent matters to attend to, so I'll be taking my leave first. After writing his name, Zhang Jiuxiao smiled at the crowd before turning around and leaving elegantly. He's simply too dashing. The ladies who had demanded the autograph a moment ago couldn't help but fall into a daze upon seeing his smile. As expected of Zhang Shi. Every time he comes to the master-teacher pavilion, there would always be a huge group of girls waiting for him. Compared to him, it's like we don't even exist at all. Well, he's the #1 genius of the Qingyuan Empire Master-Teacher Pavilion, a 1 in 500-year prodigy. Furthermore, given how cultured and refined he is, how can we compete with him? Indeed, he's far beyond our league. A few master teachers lamented bitterly as they walked by the area. The number one genius of Qingyuan Empire Master Teacher Pavilion? Zhang Xian muttered beneath his breath after hearing their words. Indeed, to be able to become a 7-star master teacher at such a young age and achieve such outstanding accomplishments as a painter, it was little wonder why so many ladies would go in a frenzy over him. Indeed, there are many talented prodigies in this world. I am not too bad myself, but I mustn't get complacent over it. Zhang Xian warned himself. While he might have been able to advance his cultivation swiftly, he mustn't get conceited over the matter. Given how large the master teacher continent was, there were bound to be outstanding geniuses who could match him somewhere. While Zhang Xian was deep in thought, the lady with the millstone bottom from before walking over once more and glanced at him disdainfully. What are you looking at? Have you never seen a beauty in your life? Zhang Xian. Chapter 1157, News on Luo Ruoxin. He had met plenty of beautiful women before, and he had just been confessed to by 2 of them a moment ago. But he had never met one with a millstone-like bottom before. To put it in slightly harsher terms, she could have served as a road roller. Forget it. However, Zhang Xian did not pay too much attention to the matter. There was not any need to be angered by something as trivial as that, so he simply asked around for Wu Shi's whereabouts before heading over. Not too long later, his eyes suddenly lit up, and he quickly walked forward. Mu Shi. The person whom he had spotted was no other than Mu Yuan. After leaving Qiu Wu Palace, the other party had returned straight back to Qingyuan Empire. He had promised the other party to meet him when he came over to Qingyuan City, but who would have thought that they would bump into one another so coincidentally here? Upon seeing Zhang Xian, Mu Shi quickly clasped his fist and greeted with a smile, "Senior uncle." Zhang Xian nodded. "You have achieved a breakthrough to Saint 4 Dan." For a very long time, Mu Shi's cultivation had been confined at Saint 3 Dan due to the presence of metal attribute energy suppressing his strength, preventing him from achieving a breakthrough. Thus, he had remained as a 7-star high-tier master teacher for a very long time. Yet, in just a short month of absence, he had successfully made a breakthrough to the primordial spirit realm. Indeed. It's all thanks to Yang Shi's guidance that I was able to take the final step forward, Mu Shi replied with deep gratitude. His encounter with Yang Shi back in Hongyuan City might have been short, but it had been truly life-changing. If not for the latter's guidance, he might very well have remained stagnant at Saint 3 Dan for his entire life, unable to advance any further. After trading a few pleasantries, Mu Shi asked, "May I know if Yang Shi has come over to Qingyuan City as well? If possible, I would like to pay him a visit and thank him personally." It was his benefactor who had allowed him to walk out of the shadow of the past and neutralize the metal attribute energy within his body, thus allowing him to achieve a breakthrough. He had been wanting to thank the other party for a very long time, but it was unfortunate that the other party's whereabouts were truly elusive. Ever since that parting back then, he had not been able to gather any news on the other party. Zhang Xian shook his head. My teacher's whereabouts are a mystery to me as well. Usually, he is the one who finds me whenever there is a need to. In essence, Yang Xian's identity was just a background that Zhang Xian had forged to instill fear and deference in the hearts of others. Otherwise, it was highly likely that the swift advancement of his cultivation would have roused the greed of others, and perhaps, some might even have attempted to kidnap him in the hope of uncovering his secret. However, with an unfathomable expert like Yang Xian backing him from the shadows, the others would have to weigh whether it was worth offending an 8-star master teacher over Zhang Xian's secret or not. After all, putting aside the overwhelming strength that an 8-star master teacher possessed, more importantly, the master teacher pavilion would surely be backing him as well. Those who dared to offend an 8-star master teacher would risk being completely annihilated by the number 1 occupation on the master teacher continent. The very eradication of the entire Soul Oracle occupation should be sufficient to highlight the overwhelming might that the Master Teacher Pavilion wielded. Since Zhang Xian was relying on Yang Xian as his trump card, naturally, it would be best to keep the other party as elusive as possible. The more times that Yang Xian appeared, the higher the chances that Zhang Xian would make a mistake and give himself away. I was still planning to meet Yang Shi once before my departure to thank him for his help. Mu Shi shook his head bitterly. I guess it can't be helped. Departure? Where is Mu Shi going? Zhang Xian asked with a frown. Mu Shi was a master teacher of the Qingyuan conferred Empire Master Teacher Pavilion. Where else could he possibly want to head to? After neutralizing of the metal attribute energy within my body and achieving a breakthrough in my cultivation, the words that Yang Shi said to me that night have been lingering my mind. Thus, I made up my mind to return to the Mu clan. I'm willing to accept any punishment that they issue to me, so long as they will accept me as one of their own once more. Mu Shi spoke with resolution. Zhang Xian was slightly dazed for a moment before nodding in realization. Mu Shi was actually from one of the sage clans, the Mu clan. However, in his earlier years, he had unintentionally leaked the secrets of his clan to a lady whom he fancied, causing him to be exiled, thus landing him in his current plight. A fallen leaf should return to its roots. After so many days of wandering, I think that it's about time for me to return to my home. Even if I cannot receive their forgiveness and eventually lose my life there, at the very least, it will be better than spending my life aimlessly out here, Mu Shi said deeply. Zhang Xian fell silent. He did not have a family, so he could not really relate to those emotions. However, he could clearly sense Mu Shi's resolution from the latter's eyes. It seemed like even if the Mu clan sentenced Mu Shi to death, the latter would still accept the verdict willingly. Mu Shi continued with a bitter look on his face. I don't wish to remain an escapee for life. Escapee? That's right. No matter what, the blood of the Mu clan flows through my veins. There's no way I can truly sever my relations with them, so I think it's about time for me to face it. And to be honest, even though I didn't think much of it then when I first left the Mu clan, the long years have given me more than sufficient time to reflect on the matter, and I regret my decision then. I really regret it. Mu Shi shook his head and sighed soulfully. Looking at Mu Shi's weathered face, Zhang Xian found himself unable to find the correct words to console the latter. It took a long while before the silence between the two was broken. Mu Shi turned to Zhang Xian and said, Senior uncle, I know that you like Luo Shi, but I think that there are still some words that I should say to you. He had witnessed the relationship between Zhang Xian and Luo Ruoxin, and he had a clear idea of what was going on. Please speak, Zhang Xian replied politely. To be honest with you, I am not too sure about Luo Shi's exact identity either, but based on what I have observed thus far, there's a very high chance that she's related with a sage clan, the Luo clan. If she truly is the young princess of the Luo clan, unless Yang Shi specially speaks on your behalf, it will be extremely difficult for you to wed her, Mu Shi said. You aren't too sure about Ruoxin's exact identity either? Zhang Xian was taken aback by those words. Based on what he knew, Mu Shi was the one who had brought Luo Shi to the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. Thus, he had always assumed that Mu Shi would know a lot about the latter. He had not expected to hear such words from Mu Shi's mouth. It has been too many years since I left the Mu clan and took root in Qingyuan City, so I am no longer in touch with the happenings there. However, judging from how Luo Shi has been able to acquire strength that far surpasses mine despite her young age, there is little doubt that she's the famed genius of the Luo clan. Not only does she wield the strongest artifact of the Luo clan, she also boasts the purest bloodline. There's no way the Luo clan will allow a person like her to marry an outsider. Mu Shi shook his head grimly. I understand that. Zhang Xian lowered his gaze as he nodded slowly. Guild leader Han and Wu Shi had told him about the matter previously as well. He knew that it would be difficult for him to get together with Luo Shi, but he had no intentions of backing down from the challenge. As a celestial master teacher and a celestial saint, he was confident that he would be able to become a man worthy of Luo Shi. If the heavens were to stand in his way, he would just have to crush the heavens. Mu Shi gazed at Zhang Xian deeply for a short moment before nodding. All right then. Since you know about it, I won't say too much about it either. However, don't blame me for being too naggy. I just want to offer you one last word of advice: don't allow her to make a decision that she will regret in the future. Regret? Zhang Xian's heart jolted. Those words had truly struck the depths of his heart. In truth, he had been considering simply snatching Luo Ruoxin away if the Luo clan adamantly opposed their relationship. In any case, he was confident that it was just a matter of time before he gained sufficient strength to do so. However, after hearing Mu Shi's advice, he could not help but rethink the matter. Yes, he might be able to get together with Luo Ruoxin using such a forceful method, but did he really want to leave her with such a deep regret for life? As the young princess of the Luo clan, she had probably grown up amid the loving care of her family and clan members. Without a doubt, she had deep feelings for her clan. Even if she were to choose him over her family in the end, there was no doubt that her decision would leave her with lingering regrets and a great deal of pain. Clenching his fists tightly, Zhang Xian said, "Don't worry, I'll make her family acknowledge me. I won't put her in a tough spot." There was only one way for him to not put Luo Ruoxin in a difficult position, and that was to have the Luo clan acknowledge their relationship. It would be an uphill battle, but for Luo Ruoxin's sake, this was the only path that he could choose. Seeing that the young man had made up his choice, Mu Shi nodded. "I see. I wish you luck then." "Right, Mu Shi," Ruoxin said that she had to leave because she had matters to attend to. "Do you have any idea where she might have gone? Also, do you know where the Luo clan is located?" Zhang Xian asked. Luo Ruoxin had left hurriedly the previous time, and she did not say where she was headed to or where he could find her. However, since Mu Shi was from a sage clan himself, he might know a thing or two. Mu Shi contemplated for a moment before replying. "The Luo clan is based in the city of sages, Xifu. However, I think that it's more likely that she has headed to the Sanctum of Sages instead of the Luo clan." Sanctum of Sages? Gathered in the Sanctum of Sages are either the offspring of sage clans or the most talented prodigies of the entire master-teacher continent. Mu Shi pondered for a moment before continuing. "Based on what I have heard, the young princess of the sage clan is a student of the Sanctum of Sages. However, it seems like she escaped from there a while back due to some kind of issue, and her whereabouts became unknown afterwards." "She's a student of the Sanctum of Sages?" Zhang Xian was astonished. He had no idea what Luo Ruoxin's true strength was, but the fact that she had been able to easily bind the leaving Aperture Realm Skyleaf King was more than sufficient to prove that her strength had far surpassed his imaginations. And yet, who would have thought that even an expert with strength like hers was only a student? Wasn't the Sanctum of Sages a little too scary? The Sanctum of Sages serves to cultivate the offspring of sage clans and young geniuses into top-notch experts of the Master-Teacher continent. Generations of the head of the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters and the various influential sage clans have all emerged from the Sanctum of Sages. "Senior uncle, if you wish to have the Luo clan acknowledge the relationship between you and Luo Shi, it would be best for you to enroll into the Sanctum of Sages as well and make your name there. This way, no one will dare take you lightly despite your humble background." Mu Shi continued. Zhang Xian nodded upon hearing those words. Even though it was known to most that he had a Yang Shi backing him, he himself knew better than anyone else that it was just a huge lie. If he wanted to marry Luo Ruoxin openly, there was no way he could rely on Yang Shi. He could still use Yang Shi to deal with smaller conflicts, the other party would not know better anyway. However, before the top master teachers in the continent, there was little doubt that his petty disguise would be unraveled in an instant. Against them, he would not even know how he died. Given so, the Sanctum of Sages was indeed his best bet. No matter what, he had to give it a try. Of course, most importantly of all, if he could enroll in the Sanctum of Sages, there was a good chance that he would be able to meet Luo Ruoxin sooner. It was difficult for a new couple to spend even a day away from one another, let alone a month. "May I know how I can enroll in the Sanctum of Sages?" Zhang Xian asked. The semester for the Sanctum of Sages starts at around the middle of the 9th month, and it usually recruits a new batch of students before that. Based on what I know, the conferred Empire Master Teacher Pavilions have a slot each to nominate a candidate to enroll in the Sanctum of Sages, and as long as the candidate clears a test, they will be brought into the Sanctum of Sages. Mu Shi replied. The middle of the 9th month. Isn't that less than 2 months away? Zhang Xian's eyebrows shot up in alarm. Indeed, it's less than 2 months away. To be more exact, it's a month and 17 days. Mu Shi replied. This. Zhang Xian frowned. Then, may I know what the prerequisites are for obtaining the nomination slot? Since the Sanctum of Sages only accepted top-notch geniuses from all over the master-teacher continent, there was bound to be some fundamental prerequisite for enrollment. One has to be a 7-star high-tier master teacher at the very minimum and possess a cultivation at the embryonic soul realm. Mu Shi replied. 7-star high-tier. Zhang Xian nodded. He was currently just a step away from reaching the embryonic soul realm. As long as he could gather sufficient concentrated high-tier spirit stones and Saint 3 Dan cultivation technique manuals to compile the corresponding Heaven's Path divine art, he would be able to achieve a breakthrough easily. That would not be too much of a problem. However, Mu Shi hesitated for a moment before continuing. The nomination slot for our Master Teacher Pavilion this year has already been allocated. It was a decision made by Pavilion Master Go personally, so I fear that it might be difficult for you to obtain it. It has already been allocated? Who is it? Not expecting the slot to be taken, Zhang Xian's face darkened. At this moment, a figure suddenly emerged in his mind, and he could not help but exclaim, could the person you are talking about be Zhang Jiuxiao? Mu Shi nodded. That's right, it's him. If I'm not mistaken, he should be an offspring from the Zhang clan, another one of the sage clans. Chapter 1158, Heart-Tempering Bridge, Zhang clan. Zhang Xian's face darkened. Back then, Wu Shi and guild leader Han had told him that the little princess of the Luo clan was betrothed to a powerful sage clan, and the said sage clan was none other than the Zhang clan. As such, he could not help but feel deeply uncomfortable upon hearing that name. He might have been able to remain calm before any other matter, but just for this single matter, he could not maintain his composure. If he could, he would not have pummeled Feng Sun so viciously after hearing that the latter had confessed to Luo Ruoxin. Mu Shi nodded. This is still a conjecture on my part at the moment, but I do believe it to be so. Wait, that doesn't sound right. Zhang Xian frowned as he recalled what Mu Shi had said earlier. Since the Sanctum of Sages serves to cultivate the offspring of sage clans, surely Zhang Jiuxiao should be able to enroll into it directly. Is there any need for him to come to the Qingyuan Empire to vie for this single slot? The Sanctum of Sages is indeed much more lenient toward the sage clans. While the conferred Empire Master Teacher Pavilions only acquire a nomination slot each year, each sage clan obtains at least 10 slots each year at the very minimum. For behemoths like the Zhang clan, they acquire at least 30 slots each year, Mu Shi explained. However, for a clan as large as the Zhang clan, 30 slots are only sufficient for them to send in the inner clan members with purer bloodlines. As for the clan members from the side families, whose bloodlines are thinner, they basically stand no chance whatsoever. As such, they scatter themselves among the conferred empire to vie for the other nomination slots in order to enroll into the Sanctum of Sages. Once they get in, they are entitled to the best cultivation resources and the most outstanding heritages. To the side families of powerful clans, this is an ideal opportunity for them to change their fate, so no one is willing to allow this opportunity slip through their fingers. With them around, doesn't that mean that the local prodigies of the conferred empires don't stand a chance at all? Zhang Xian asked in displeasure. There was only a single nomination slot in each conferred empire, and if the side families of the sage clans sent their members over, wouldn't the local prodigies stand no chance at all? Survival of the fittest, this is something that can't be helped. If there is a prodigy in the conferred empire who can surpass the member of the side family, the prodigy will naturally obtain the slot. Otherwise, the nomination slot can only be given to the member of the side family. Mu Shi shook his head. Even the offspring from the sage clans were not above the rules. They dared not openly snatch slots from the conferred empire master-teacher pavilions, but they were still allowed to compete for it fairly. If their skills surpassed those of the local master-teachers of the conferred empire, the slot would only be allocated to them. The Sanctum of Sages only accepted the strongest experts on the continent. If one was inferior to their competitors, it would only mean that they were not qualified to join the Sanctum of Sages. The rules were that simple, direct, and harsh. You're right. Zhang Xian nodded. This was just like the combat master selection. As the students of his Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy had the strongest fighting prowess, it was natural that they would all be picked. The other 3 Master Teacher Academies had outstanding students as well, and many of them would have stood a chance had they not been put against the candidates of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. It was unfortunate for them, but they only had their own bad luck to blame. That was how harsh the world of cultivation was. Nevertheless, the presence of the Master Teacher Pavilion still brought around some degree of meritocracy. Even if an individual had a humble background, as long as he had sufficient talent and were willing to work hard, he would be able to make a name for himself too. Take Zhang Xian for example. Despite being a mere orphan from the Tianxian kingdom, he had still been able to slowly scale up the ladder and eventually become the principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. While Zhang Jiuxiao is only from a side family of the Zhang clan, the talent that he possesses is undeniable. Despite being only 27 this year, he has already reached the astounding height of a 7-star high-tier master teacher, a Saint 3 Dan pinnacle expert. His fighting prowess and capabilities are unmatched by any master teacher in the Qingyuan Empire Master Teacher Academy, so naturally, the nomination slot went to him, Mu Shi said. To tell you the truth, the side families of sage clans don't possess a particularly high standing, and the resources that they are entitled to are severely limited as well. For one as young as him to have achieved such accomplishments, on top of possessing considerable talent, he must have put in quite a bit of hard work as well. Zhang Xian nodded. He could relate deeply to that. Indeed. Talent without diligence was futile. Even a prodigy would achieve little in their life if they refused to devote themselves to their work. Again, taking Zhang Xian for example, it had taken him an entire year of blood, sweat, and tears before he was able to earn his current accomplishments. The difficulties he had faced over the year were truly hard to describe using words. Zhang Xian turned to Mu Shi and asked, I'll definitely have to head to the Sanctum of Sages, but how can I obtain the slot? Now that he knew that Luo Ruoxin was likely to be at the Sanctum of Sages, he definitely had to head there as well. Regardless of the means, he was determined to obtain the nomination slot. You only have one chance. In 20 days, the Sanctum of Sages will send an envoy over to escort the nominated candidate over. If you can successfully become a 7-star master teacher, obtain a cultivation of Saint 3 Dan pinnacle, and defeat Zhang Jiuxiao in every aspect before then, naturally, the qualifications will go to you. The timing is extremely rushed, but I fear that there is no other way, Mu Shi said. 20 days. Zhang Xian pondered for a moment before nodding decisively. All right. If it was just 2 to 3 days, he would need to rush a bit. However, 20 days was more than sufficient for him. All right. Mu Shi looked at Zhang Xian doubtfully. If I recall correctly, your cultivation is still only at Saint 1 Dan pinnacle. You are still 2 whole realms away from reaching Saint 3 Dan pinnacle. Oh, I accidentally made a breakthrough to Saint 2 Dan pinnacle last night, Zhang Xian replied with a smile as he leaked out a little bit of his cultivation. Due to the unique nature of the Heaven's Path divine art, as long as he did not intentionally display his cultivation, not even Mu Shi would be able to discern his current cultivation realm. Accidentally? You made a breakthrough to Saint 2 Dan pinnacle. Mu Shi's lips twitched wildly. He felt something stifling in his chest, and it took him a long while before he managed to soothe it. Sighing deeply, he remarked, "Senior Uncle Sure is a talented individual." Back when they were still in Wu Palace, the other party had only been at St. One Dan Pinnacle. Yet, over the span of a single month, he had managed to advance a whole cultivation realm. The rate of advancement of his cultivation was truly unheard of in history. However, I fear that just this much might not be enough. There is a huge gap between the spiritual perception realm and the embryonic soul realm, and even if you do achieve a breakthrough within the next 20 days, it'll take at least several years before you will be able to fuse your soul into your origin soul perfectly. Mu Shi was not too optimistic about Zhang Xian's chances. Beyond Saint Realm, progressing past every single realm was like venturing into a whole new world. Even the most talented of prodigies would require several years before they were able to fully grasp a cultivation realm and advance to the next level. To be honest, attempting a breakthrough within a short 20 days was nothing more than a pipe dream. And more importantly, Zhang Jiuxiao isn't an ordinary Saint 3 Dan Pinnacle cultivator. He has built up a powerful foundation, allowing him to match cultivators far stronger than he is. Ordinary Saint 4 Dan cultivators are no match for him, and even I would only stand a 50% chance against him after my breakthrough, Mu Shi explained with a frown. As an ex-inner clan member of the Mu clan, he had cultivated top-notch cultivation techniques and battle techniques, granting him strength far surpassing that of ordinary master teachers. Yet, despite his recent breakthrough to Saint 4 Dan, the other party was still able to match him equally with his Saint 3 Dan pinnacle cultivation. Just this in itself was sufficient to show how fearsome an existence Zhang Jiuxiao was. "You stand a 50% chance against him?" Zhang Xian asked contemplatively. A moment later, he added, "Mu Shi, do you mind testing my strength?" "Test your strength?" "Sure." Knowing Zhang Xian's intentions, Mu Shi took him to the training grounds within the master-teacher pavilion, and crossing his hands before his chest, he said, "Feel free to make a move. I have not reinforced my cultivation after my breakthrough yet, so ultimately, I am still a primordial spirit realm expert. It would be good for you to experience the true might of a primordial spirit realm expert so that you are mentally prepared." "Don't worry, I won't use my full strength." "Who?" Before Mu Shi could finish his words, a figure suddenly appeared before him, and before he could even process what was going on, he saw a fist abruptly flying for his chest. Not expecting Zhang Xian to be able to move so swiftly, Mu Shi's eyebrows shot up. He swiftly tapped into the entirety of his strength, wanting to fend off the other party's punch. However, just as he was preparing his retaliation, he suddenly felt an overwhelming soul pressure assaulting him from the surroundings, preventing him from moving. Pang! The punch struck Mu Shi's chest squarely, and he was knocked straight out of the training grounds before crashing heavily into the wall. Huge mouthfuls of blood spewed wildly from his mouth. Following which, a young man's apologetic voice sounded in his ears. "I'm truly sorry. Mu Shi, are you still fine? I already tried holding myself back earlier, using just a fifth of my strength, but I didn't think that you wouldn't be able to receive it." "Pooh." Mu Shi's face paled, and another huge mouthful of blood spurted from his lips. He nearly fainted on the spot after hearing those words. For a brief moment, he had thought that he was facing a Saint 4 Dan pinnacle expert instead of a Saint 2 Dan cultivator. Against such strength, even 5 of him would not be an opponent for the other party. Zhang Xian quickly helped Mu Shi up apologetically while asking with a doubtful look on his face, "Does that master teacher Zhang Jiuxiao only possess this much strength?" Cough cough. Mu Shi's face reddened, and he coughed out yet another mouthful of blood. While the Mu clan did not specialize in combat, no matter what, he still used to be one of the inner clan members who inherited the heritage of the main family. His fighting prowess should have been far stronger than his peers, and yet, he was actually subdued in a single punch by a master teacher whose cultivation was far lower than his. Just the thought of it left him deeply stifled within. It took a long while before Mu Shi was able to calm himself down. With a face reddened in embarrassment, he said awkwardly, "Actually, Zhang Jiuxiao's prowess is slightly above mine. Nevertheless, with fighting prowess like yours, even if you don't achieve a breakthrough, you should be able to defeat him easily." If Zhang Xian was already this powerful with a cultivation of Saint 2 Dan, once he broke through to Saint 3 Dan, Zhang Jiuxiao would probably stand no chance against him at all. Other than the requirement on my cultivation, what other prerequisites are there to enter the sanctum of sages? If possible, I would like to ask Mu Shi to train along with me so that I can get a clear grasp of the standards. Mu Shi's face warped in horror upon hearing those words, and he quickly shook his head. I'm not free. Just a simple test of cultivation had nearly cost him his life. If that were to continue, he feared that the confidence that he had barely picked up would be shattered once more. What you have to do now is be promoted to a 7-star master teacher as soon as possible. That is the fundamental prerequisite for joining the sanctum of sages. If you do not meet this prerequisite, it'll be futile even if your fighting prowess exceeds that of Zhang Jiuxiao's. Mu Shi said. Zhang Xian nodded in response to those words. This happened to coincide with his current goal. At the moment, he was just lacking 2 more supporting occupations before he was qualified to be promoted to a 7-star master teacher. Alright, I have already said all that I should say. I need to be on my way now, so farewell. After saying those words, Mu Shi turned around and left hurriedly. He was afraid that if he remained any longer, he would be traumatized once more. Ah! Not expecting Mu Shi to leave so decisively, Zhang Xian shook his head in disappointment. Sighing deeply, he walked out of the training grounds and headed in the direction of Wu Shi's residence, as pointed out by a master teacher from before. Before Zhang Xian could get far, he heard a series of ear-piercing shrieks in his ear. Zhang Shi, you can do it. Zhang Shi, we believe in you. You will definitely be able to set a new record. Looking past the huge crowd, he saw a long stone bridge. A man was standing right on top of the bridge with sweat flowing profusely down his face. It seemed like he was under immense pressure. The man was none other than the offspring of the Zhang clan, Zhang Jiuxiao. What is he doing? Zhang Xian was perplexed. At this moment, a master teacher amid the crowd suddenly exclaimed loudly, Zhang Jiuxiao is challenging the heart-tempering bridge? Chapter 1159, You Can Do It, Heart-Tempering Bridge. Confused, Zhang Xian turned his gaze over and saw that the one who had just spoken was a 6-star master teacher like him. The other party seemed to be in his 40s, and there was an aged look of a veteran on his face. Zhang Shi's talent has allowed him to advance his cultivation swiftly, but that, in exchange, has made his mental fortitude his greatest weakness. As such, Pavilion Master Go has sent him out to temper his mind well. He has returned from his journey just a while ago, and it seems like he's attempting to give it a try to see if he is able to break his previous record, the 6-star master teacher explained. To be able to raise his cultivation realm to Saint 3 Dan pinnacle and advance his master teacher rank to 7-star before hitting his 30s, Zhang Jiuxiao was indeed a formidable genius. On top of that, as he was from the sage Zhang clan, there was also nothing to pick about his background either. The only thing that was lacking about him was his mental fortitude. This was also the reason why he had been working on it over the past month, hoping to achieve a breakthrough in it soon. Ahem, I am asking about the heart-tempering bridge, not Zhang Jiuxiao. Zhang Xian cleared his throat. All he wanted to know was what the heart-tempering bridge was used for. It didn't matter to him how powerful or weak Zhang Jiuxiao was. In his view, it was just the difference between 1 punch or 2 punch anyway. There was truly no need for him to go to the extent of analyzing his opponent's strength. The heart-tempering bridge is a unique artifact that assesses one's mental fortitude. Those who attempt to walk through it will be placed under immense pressure, and cultivators with weaker minds would find themselves succumbing to the pressure very soon. All in all, there are 10 levels for the entire bridge, and even a typical 7-star pinnacle master teacher would find it hard to reach the end. Previously, Zhang Shi has only managed to reach the 4th level. This time, he is intending to see if he will be able to surpass his previous record. The 6-star master teacher shot a perplexed glance at Zhang Xian, but he still chose to explain it anyway. There were no master teachers in Qingyuan Empire who were unaware of the existence of the heart-tempering bridge. For the other party to disregard the number 1 genius of their master teacher pavilion and focus on a mere bridge instead, this had truly rendered him speechless. 4th level. Don't underestimate the heart-tempering bridge. The previous record of the heart-tempering bridge for cultivators beneath 30 is left behind by Yi Shi 2,000 years ago, but even he had only managed to reach the 4th level. The fact that Zhang Shi is able to reach the 4th level is already a formidable feat in itself. However, Pavilion Master Go has high hopes for him. He feels like reaching the 4th level isn't enough, so he tasked Zhang Shi to work harder on his mental fortitude. The 6-star master teacher replied. I see. Zhang Xian nodded. You aren't surprised by his achievement? Seeing how nonchalantly the young man was acting, the 6-star master teacher couldn't help but feel a little stifled within. When he first heard about Zhang Shi's accomplishments back then, he had been so shocked that he fell into a very long moment of daze before he could finally regain himself. Yet, the fellow before him simply replied with a nonchalant, I see, as if the achievement was nothing at all. Did the other party not get what was going on, or was he feigning composure? Surprised? Why should I be surprised? Didn't you say that there are 10 levels? He has only reached the 4th the previous time, so even if he did make some improvement over the past month, at the very most, he would only at the 5th or 6th now. That's still a long way to go before reaching the end. Zhang Xian scratched his head in confusion. Honestly speaking, he had never really cultivated his mental fortitude as well, so he couldn't relate to the difficulty and torture in tempering it. What 4th level and 5th level, he had completely no notion of that at all. Since that was the case, what did he have to be surprised over? You. Hearing those seemingly ignorant words, the 6-star master teacher staggered and nearly spurted blood. He quickly explained, the fact that 7-star pinnacle master teachers would find it hard to reach the other end of the bridge means to say that it's a trial which even Saint 4 Dan pinnacle experts are unable to clear. Just think about it, primordial spirit realm experts, despite the superior prowess of their primordial spirits granting them mental fortitude far surpassing that of ordinary cultivators, are still unable to reach the 10th level. Given so, the fact that Zhang Shi, a Saint 3 Dan cultivator, was able to reach the 4th level is already a frightening feat in itself. Ah. Zhang Xian replied indifferently. So it's a formidable feat, then how should I react to this matter? Should I be shocked, or should I scream like the others over there? Forget it. Seeing that the other party was still unable to comprehend the significance of the feat, the 6-star master teacher shook his head helplessly and gave up. At this point, he was really starting to doubt whether the young man before him had robbed the master teacher robe and emblem from elsewhere to put it on. To think that there would be a master teacher in Qingyuan City who wouldn't even know about the heart-tempering bridge, as well as the significance of a young man below 30 reaching the 4th level on it. Just how lacking must his general knowledge be? Look, look! Zhang Shi is about to overcome the 4th level. Wah, you're right. Impressive. I feel like my admiration for him is shooting up swiftly. As expected of my idol. Woo woo, I am so agitated at this moment that my tears are about to stain my pants wet. All of a sudden, the piercing shrieks abruptly crescendoed. Zhang Xian and the 6-star master teacher quickly halted their conversation and turned their gazes back towards the heart-tempering bridge. There, Zhang Jiuxiao's figure could be seen gradually nearing the center of the bridge. Despite the tremendous pressure that the latter was clearly under, his body was shaking, and his robe was completely drenched in sweat. He did successfully hold on up to the point. Is that the demarcation of levels? Seeing how exhausted Zhang Jiuxiao was, Zhang Xian couldn't help but take a closer look at the bridge. There, he saw various red lines scattered across the bridge, and Zhang Jiuxiao had passed the 4th and was slowly making his way over to the 5th. As expected of the number 1 genius of our master teacher pavilion. Despite only spending a month in the marshlands of the northern meadows, his mental fortitude has already grown by such a great extent. At this rate, it might really be possible for him to reach the 5th level today. The 6-star master teacher remarked in agitation. Marshlands of the northern meadows? Hearing that phrase, Zhang Xian couldn't help but frown. It hadn't been long since he had arrived at Qingyuan City, but this must be his 3rd or 4th time hearing of that location. Vicious body parts could very well be there, and it seemed like a soul oracle had settled there as well. Why would the number 1 genius of the master teacher pavilion head to such a dangerous location to temper his mental fortitude? That's right. According to the rumors, there is a place known as the Ghost Cavern in the marshlands of the northern meadows that raises one's mental fortitude immensely. It is extremely famous even in the surrounding empires, and there are many master teachers who would head to the northern meadows each year to seek it, hoping of training their mind. The fact that Zhang Shi dared to challenge the heart-tempering bridge after spending less than a month there, even improving his record by an entire level, means that it's very likely that he might have found the Ghost Cavern. The 6-star master teacher explained in excitement. Ghost Cavern? What's in there? Zhang Xian's curiosity was piqued. The conventional methods that others used to temper their mental fortitude were the usage of inner demons, illusions, pain, and sourcing for inspiration for enlightenment. So what did the Ghost Cavern rely on to allow one's mental fortitude to increase swiftly, attracting so many master teachers to seek it? I have never been there before, so I'm not too sure either. However, I heard that there's a body of spring water there that deeply resembles the shape of an eye. Staring into it would allow one to peer into the deepest desires in their hearts, and the longer one stares into it for, the more desires would spring up. As long as one kills off the desires that are reflected in the spring water, their minds would grow more wholesome and resilient. The 6-star master teacher pondered for a brief moment before responding. A body of spring water that can reflect one's deepest desires? Zhang Xian widened his eyes in astonishment. Indeed. I was also as shocked as you when I first heard of the matter, and I didn't believe it either. However, there are simply too many rumors that lend credibility to the case, so eventually, I could only accept it to be true. Also, another thing that is perplexing about the Ghost Cavern is that it doesn't seem to be fixed to one location. Instead, it moves around, and only the truly fortunate master teachers are able to find it. There were more than 20 master teachers who have headed to the northern meadows along with Zhang Shi this time around, but Zhang Shi was the only one who enjoyed a tremendous increase in his mental fortitude. It seems like the others simply just aren't as lucky. The 6-star master teacher said. I see. Zhang Xian nodded. From the sounds of it, it seemed like the marshlands of the northern meadows was truly a mysterious place. If he had some time after being promoted to a 7-star master teacher, he would really have to head over there to take a look himself. While Zhang Xian was deep in thoughts, excited shrieks continued resounding from the surroundings, and there was a single one which was particularly piercing. Look! Zhang Shi has already reached the 5th level. Turning around, Zhang Xian noted that the source of the sound had come from the millstone bottom lady whom he had encountered just a few moments ago. The latter was staring at the heart-tempering bridge with gleaming eyes, and if she could, Zhang Xian had no doubt that she would pounce on Zhang Jiuxiao at this very moment to bear his babies. After which, he turned his gaze back to the bridge and saw that Zhang Jiuxiao had already passed the 5th red line. However, it seemed like he had reached his limit as well. His body was trembling so intensely that he could hardly move anymore, and it seemed like he would collapse at any moment. This is probably his limit. Zhang Xian noted. Seeing that the show was over, Zhang Xian was just about to leave the area when he suddenly heard a deeply displeased voice echoing from the other end of the bridge, "Send off our guest." Following which, the doors to a residence at the other end of the bridge suddenly creaked open, and 2 armored individuals walked out with awkward looks on their faces. It's Wu Shi. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up. He could tell in an instant that the displeased voice belonged to Wu Shi. It seemed like he was in the residence on the other side of the bridge. I should head over to find him. With this thought in mind, Zhang Xian began walking towards the stone bridge without any hesitation, wanting to cross to the other side. Persevere, persevere. I must persevere on. On the bridge, Zhang Jiuxiao's sweat flowed profusely down his head. At this point, the vision before him had already blurred, and the only thing that was pushing him on was the tenacity in his mind. But no matter how hard he tried to push himself, he was already completely sapped. This was the limit of his mental fortitude, and it was impossible for him to push any further. Eventually, he could only give in. Forget it, I'll just stop here today. Giving up, Zhang Jiuxiao turned around, only to see a young man with a 6-star master teacher emblem pinned on his chest walking over leisurely. From the faint aura that the latter emanated, he could vaguely discern that the latter was a Saint Tu Dan pinnacle cultivator. The young man walked up to him nonchalantly, nodded in approval, and pulled his arm down in an encouraging gesture. You can do it. After which, he proceeded on to cross the bridge leisurely. It was a trial which left his mind feeling as if it would succumb at any moment, and yet, the other party was able to clear it so easily as if it was a mere stroll down the streets. He cleared the 10th level so easily. The stupefied Zhang Jiuxiao stared at the sight before him with twitching lips. He wasn't the only one who was flabbergasted by this inconceivable situation. The surroundings had suddenly grown so silent that one could literally hear a pin drop. The 6-star master teacher who had been speaking to Zhang Xian earlier had an expression on his face which suggested that he had seen a ghost. The millstone bottom lady had also halted her fervent cheer dance. In this instant, her mouth was widened even larger than her bottom. Chapter 1160, Bail. After leaving the heart-tempering bridge, Zhang Xian shook his head in disappointment. Damn, I thought that it would at least be kind of challenging. He had expected a challenge from the heart-tempering bridge, but when he walked across it, he had realized that it was truly nothing at all. He did not feel the slightest resistance. It did not even jolt his soul in the slightest. All he wanted to do was temper his mental fortitude and try raising his soul depth, but this simple wish just would not come true for him. When he went to the trial of inner demons, his inner demons refused to appear. When he walked over the heart-tempering bridge, he did not feel the slightest thing. Why did life have to be so difficult? Shaking his head in pity, Zhang Xian walked toward the room where Wu Shi's voice originated from previously and knocked on the door. Walking in, he saw Wu Shi seated in the middle with a livid expression. He did not seem to be in a good mood at that moment. Perplexed, Zhang Xian asked, "What's wrong?" When he parted with Wu Shi earlier, the latter had still had a smile on his face. It had not even been an hour since then, so why would his mood suddenly sour so quickly? Hearing Zhang Xian's question, Wu Shi rubbed his glabella and said, "The two men earlier came on the orders of Emperor Chu Tianqing to demand King Zhongqing's release, so I chased them out." The emperor wants to have King Zhongqing released? Zhang Xian frowned. Does he not understand the crime of slandering a master teacher? While Zhang Xian might not have been a master teacher of the Qingyuan Empire, and his rank had not reached 7-star, he was still the principal of a master teacher academy, and there were 100,000 master teachers standing behind him. Considering that the other party had been caught slandering him, wasn't Emperor Chu Tianqing taking him too lightly by demanding King Zhongqing's release without even investigating the matter? If such a thing were to be approved, what would become of the Master Teacher Pavilion's dignity? I sent my men to explain the matter to Emperor Chu Tianqing right after capturing King Zhongqing, Wu Shi said grimly. No matter what, King Zhongqing was the first king of the Qingyuan Empire. Considering that the Master Teacher Pavilion had sent out all its forces to apprehend the latter, it might sour the relations between the Master Teacher Pavilion and the royal family if he did not deal with this matter properly. You have already explained this matter, but Emperor Chu Tianqing still sent his men over to demand King Zhongqing's release? Isn't he being far too brazen? Zhang Xian frowned. King Zhongqing's act of finding the ex-vice head of the poison hall to frame him was a truly major crime, and yet, Emperor Chu Tianqing, despite knowing that such actions would offend the Master Teacher Pavilion, still demanded King Zhongqing's release. Just what in the world was going through the minds of the nobles of the Qingyuan Empire? Did they not understand that even if it was the royal family of a conferred empire, once they lost the protection of the local master-teacher pavilion, they would spiral into a cycle of endless decline and soon face destruction? Wu Shi shook his head and sighed deeply. I'm not too sure either, but I think that he might have been emboldened by Vice Pavilion Master Tian. For the authoritative vice-head of the master-teacher pavilion to work together with a king to accuse a master-teacher without investigating the matter properly was truly a huge oversight. The future of a master-teacher could very well have been ruined due to it. The only reason Zhang Xian was fine was because they had rushed over in time. Otherwise, held captive by the duo, he would have been no different from a prey on the chopping board. As long as the duo pulled some tricks, he could very well have found himself pinned with an accusation that he would never be able to cleanse himself of. Such matters happened far too frequently. It was simply too easy to slander and accuse another of a crime, especially when two of the most authoritative individuals in the Qingyuan Empire were working with one another. Zhang Xian nodded. He was just about to reveal his deduction when someone suddenly knocked on the door outside. Following which, a master teacher walked in and reported, "Teacher, Emperor Chu Tianqing of the Qingyuan Empire seeks an audience. He has already arrived. Invite him in." Frowning, Wu Shi waved his hand. He had chased away the envoys of Emperor Chu Tianqing just a few minutes earlier, but then the latter suddenly arrived personally. From the looks of it, it seemed like he had already been waiting outside for the results. The master teacher backed out of the room, and not too long later, a middle-aged man dressed in a yellow robe walked in with widened strides. Just like Wu Shi, the middle-aged man's cultivation had reached half-leaving aperture realm as well. His eyes carried an authoritative air reminiscent of a majestic tiger. With just a look, it was apparent that his unique aura had been cultivated by the many years he had spent in a lofty position. Wu Shi. As soon as the middle-aged man walked into the room, he quickly clasped his fist politely. Although he was the emperor of the Qingyuan Empire, his standing still paled in comparison to Wu Shi, a vice-head of the master-teacher pavilion. Take a seat. Wu Shi gestured as he assessed the middle-aged man before him nonchalantly. If your majesty is here to request King Zhongqing's release, I'll have to ask you not to waste your breath. Framing a master-teacher is a grievous crime that our master-teacher pavilion is unable to pardon. I have already reported the matter to the headquarters, so if you continue insisting on this matter, I fear that the entire Qingyuan Empire might be implicated in this issue. Thus, I have to ask you to think twice before speaking. Wu Shi's words were not particularly sharp, but they were devoid of warmth. His tone had made it perfectly clear that there was no room for negotiation. Instead of proceeding on to take a seat, Emperor Chu clasped his fist and spoke in an earnest tone. It truly pains me to see King Zhongqing committing such foolishness, but Wu Shi, you also know that I would have been killed long ago if not for him. Thus, regardless of how big a crime he has committed, I am willing to compensate the master-teacher pavilion for it. Thus, I beseech the master-teacher pavilion to give him and me an opportunity to apologize to Zhang Shi personally and plead for his pardon. Apologize? If apologies truly work, what would the world need our master-teacher pavilion for? Wu Shi waved his hands impatiently. Send our guest out. Yes. The master-teacher who had led Emperor Chu Tianqing in nodded before walking up to the ladder. Your Majesty, this way please. This. The expression on Chu Tianqing's face turned awkward upon hearing those words. He had prepared a long script to convince the other party of the matter, but it seemed like the other party was not intending to give him an opportunity to speak at all. Thus, sighing deeply, he turned around to leave the room. However, before he could step out of the room, a voice suddenly sounded. Wu Shi, hold it for a moment. Didn't he say that he intends to compensate the master-teacher pavilion for the matter? I'm interested to hear how much he's willing to offer to save King Zhongqing. Emperor Chu Tianqing turned around and saw a young man in his 20s, dressed in the robe of a 6-star master-teacher, seated not too far away from Wu Shi. The young man was none other than Zhang Xian. Principal Zhang. Not expecting Zhang Xian to suddenly interject at this moment, Wu Shi turned to look at the other party in bewilderment. A moment later, he closed his eyes and nodded before turning his gaze back to Emperor Chu Tianqing. Since Zhang Shi has already spoken on your behalf, I'll listen to your words. Zhang Shi. Emperor Chu Tianqing swiftly understood what was going on. He quickly walked up to Zhang Xian and bowed slightly. King Zhongqing has truly erred in attempting to slander Zhang Shi. As long as Zhang Shi is willing to let bygones be bygones, I'm willing to build a new accommodation to house the students from the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy and unconditionally provide enough cultivation resources for 100 years. On top of that, from this day forth, any student from Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy who drops by Qingyuan City will be able to receive a cultivation technique manual and a few small gifts as a token of our sincerity. We won't allow any one of them to leave Qingyuan City empty-handed. Knowing that the other party was the principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, Emperor Chu Tianqing chose to center his offer around the academy instead. As expected of the man who had the entire Qingyuan Empire in his grasp, he knew how to make an offer that was irresistible to the other party. Naturally, as a principal of a Master Teacher Academy, Zhang Xian's priority would be the welfare of his student, and to be honest, the terms that he had offered were truly generous. With the backing of a conferred empire, it was only a matter of time before Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy became the top of the 4 great Master Teacher Academies. That's not enough, Zhang Xian said nonchalantly. This. Chu Tianqing was visibly taken aback by Zhang Xian's refusal. However, he swiftly recovered and said, Zhang Shi, if you have any requests, feel free to raise them. As long as it's within the means of our royal family, we will accomplish it without the slightest frown. Zhang Xian glanced at Emperor Chu Tianqing and said, simple. Add in another 100 concentrated high-tier spirit stones to your previous terms, and you can take back King Zhongqing right now. He was currently severely lacking in cultivation resources. It was far more practical for him to receive concentrated high-tier spirit stones from the other party than to hold a king in custody. In any case, he could easily get rid of King Zhongqing whenever he wanted to, so it did not matter whether the latter remained imprisoned or not. 100 concentrated high-tier spirit stones? Emperor Chu Tianqing widened his eyes in astonishment before a bitter smile surfaced on his lips. Zhang Shi, you must be joking. Even if we sold everything in our imperial treasury, we still would not be able to fork out that sum. In the first place, concentrated high-tier spirit stones were a severely lacking commodity in Qingyuan City. Even the Combat Master Hall, an organization that the Master Teacher Pavilion had devoted a large portion of its resources to, only had 10 concentrated high-tier spirit stones in their reserves. No matter how wealthy the Qingyuan royal family was, there was no way it would be able to fork out 10 times the sum in a single breath. Very well then, I shall give you a discount. 50 concentrated high-tier spirit stones, and King Zhongqing will be yours to take away. This is my final offer, and if you can't fulfill that condition, I'll have to ask you to leave. Zhang Xian waved his hand. He also knew that the other party would be unable to afford 100 concentrated high-tier spirit stones. Nevertheless, he had chosen to ask for it so that he would have some room to bargain. This. Chu Tianqing's lips twitched. 50 concentrated high-tier spirit stones still was not a sum that the Qingyuan royal family could afford. Emperor Chu Tianqing contemplated for a long while before responding. Zhang Shi, to be honest with you, even with the 10 millennium reign of our Qingyuan royal family, we only have 17 concentrated high-tier spirit stones at the moment. We did have quite a handful of it in the past, but most of them were bestowed to the princes and meritorious subjects. Is it possible for me to give all 17 to you and make up for the rest with valuable medicinal herbs and ores? There was no way he would be able to fork out 50 concentrated high-tier spirit stones, but as long as the other party was willing, he would still be able to find substitutes for the rest. All right then. Here are the ores and medicinal herbs I require, and as long as you are able to gather all of them, I can let King Zhongqing go with just 17 concentrated high-tier spirit stones. Also, I require as many Saint 3 Dan and Saint 4 Dan cultivation technique manuals as possible. Make a copy of every single book in your library and pass them to me, Zhang Xian said as he whipped out a brush and paper and swiftly penned down a list. He was intending on making use of this opportunity to upgrade the Golden Origin Cauldron and Glacier Rain Sword. He already had the main materials, but he was still lacking a few supporting materials. If he were to search for them himself, who knew how long it would take before he was able to gather the required materials? It would be best if he could enlist Emperor Chu Tianqing's help for this matter. Very well. Emperor Chu Tianqing took the list and browsed through it. While there were some materials that seemed to be relatively rare, with the prowess of an entire conferred empire, he should be able to gather all of them promptly. Thus, he accepted the request heartily. After which, he flicked his wrist and passed a jade container over. Here are the 17 concentrated high-tier spirit stones. Zhang Shi, please take a look. Zhang Xian swiftly swept through the contents in the jade container and verified that the other party was not lying. Nodding, he stowed the jade container into his storage ring. Zhang Shi and Wu Shi, please give me a moment while I deal with the rest. After saying those words, Emperor Chu Tianqing turned around and issued some instructions to his attendant. As expected of the emperor of a conferred empire, his connections were truly astounding. In just 2 mere hours, the ores and medicinal herbs that Zhang Xian had requested had been successfully gathered. Even the books that Zhang Xian had requested earlier were all stacked up neatly before him. For those that they could not copy in time, the originals were brought over instead. All in all, there were roughly several 100,000 books for Saint 3 Dan and above 10,000 books for Saint 4 Dan. Zhang Xian placed those items into his storage ring before nodding in satisfaction. All right, you may take King Zhongqing away now. Thank you, Zhang Shi. Emperor Chu Tianqing quickly turned to Wu Shi, and upon seeing the latter nod in agreement as well, he heaved a sigh of relief. After which, he followed a master teacher down to the underground prison, to where King Zhongqing was locked up. As soon as Emperor Chu Tianqing left, Wu Shi immediately turned a perplexed look to Zhang Xian, uncomprehending of what the latter was up to. Principal Zhang. Chapter 1161, Chenji's death. Do you feel that I shouldn't have released King Zhongqing? Taking Wu Shi's expression into sight, Zhang Xian chuckled softly. Emperor Chu Tianqing's offer might be alluring, but I don't think that it's a good idea to accede to his request. Wu Shi nodded. Master teachers mustn't be sullied. This isn't a matter about compensation but pride. If a precedent were to be set, it might send out a wrong message about the Master Teacher Pavilion stand, and others might begin to emulate King Zhongqing's actions. After the affairs that they had gone through together in the Qiu Wu Palace, he had come to know the young man before him as an extremely wise and discerning individual. As such, while he didn't agree with the latter's decision, he didn't interject during the discussion earlier on because he knew that the latter would surely have his considerations for making his decision. However, with Emperor Chu Tianqing's departure, he couldn't hold back his intrigue any longer. I'll explain the matter to you, but before that, I would like to ask Wu Shi a single question. Will you speak of the matter concerning Celestial Master Teacher to any other Master Teachers in your Master Teacher Pavilion? Zhang Xian asked. Upon hearing those words, Wu Shi's face immediately turned grim. He quickly set up an isolation barrier around him before assessing his surroundings to confirm that there was no one around. Only then did he respond with a soft voice, Principal Zhang, you must be absolutely careful when you speak of this matter. To respond to your question, due to the huge implications regarding the matter concerning Celestial Master Teacher, there's an absolute need to maintain a silence restraint on the matter. If word were to be leaked to the otherworldly demonic tribe, it could result in a disastrous outcome. Therefore, even if it's to the headquarters, I would choose to maintain my silence. He knew that the young man before him was a Celestial Master Teacher. However, this matter mustn't be spoken of lightly to others. If news were to fall into the wrong hands, it might cause the otherworldly demonic tribe to send its forces frenziedly after the other party. Putting aside the devastating destruction that would occur as a result of that, more importantly, it might result in the premature downfall of the master teacher before him. If that were to happen, he would become a sinner of history. I share the same thoughts as you. However, Vice Pavilion Master Tian revealed the existence of a celestial master teacher right before me. Back when Vice Pavilion Master Tian was interrogating him at King Zhongqing Manor, the other party had once said these words: "From what I know, even a celestial master teacher has recently appeared in the world, so I don't think that the revival of the founder of the Poison Hall is something too absurd to believe." Back then, he had already realized that something was amiss. There was no master teacher who didn't understand the significance of those 3 words. It was the first time that Vice Pavilion Master Tian was meeting him, and yet, the other party actually revealed such an important news to him. This was a clear breach of the silence restraint. That was also the main reason why he didn't hesitate in dealing with Vice Pavilion Master Tian. You are saying that Vice Pavilion Master Tian knows that you are Celestial Master Teacher? Wu Shi's face darkened. From the looks of it, that doesn't seem to be the case. If anything, he seems to be trying to sound me out instead. Zhang Xian shook his head. Judging from the other party's tone, it didn't seem like the other party knew of the matter yet. However, the fact that the other party raised the term Celestial Master Teacher before him showed that the other party harbored some doubts regarding his identity. However, given how calmly he was able to respond to the other party, not showing the slightest bit of fluster, he should have been able to dispel the doubts in the other party's mind. That's a relief. However, Principal Zhang, you must be careful. Next time, no matter where you head to, you must make sure to bring either me or Hall Master Xing with you for your own safety. Wu Shi advised gravely. As long as the news hadn't leaked, Principal Zhang would only be seen as an incredible prodigy in the eyes of others. An uncommon existence, yes, but there were still a handful of others just like him in the world as well. However, if others were to learn that he was a celestial master teacher, that would truly be a catastrophe. For the time being, there's no need to resort to such measures yet. Such extreme actions would be as good as confirming the suspicions of others. Zhang Xian shook his head. If he were to utilize all of the means he had in his hands, he was confident that he would be able to fare much better than with the protection of the duo. On the other hand, if the duo were going to be tagging around him, it wouldn't be convenient for him to utilize those means, and it would place him in a more dangerous position than before. This. Wu Shi hesitated. Indeed. If he and Hall Master Xing were to follow the other party day in and day out, even those who hadn't doubted the matter previously would start getting suspicious. That would be as good as giving themselves away. There's something wrong with Pavilion Master Tian, and King Zhongqing has colluded with the Poison Hall to concoct huge quantities of poison. I have a feeling that those 2 matters are related. Also, there is something amiss about Emperor Chu Tianqing paying a visit to you personally and paying such a heavy price just to bail King Zhongqing. I don't believe that he would go so far just to repay the latter for saving his life. Zhang Xian analyzed grimly. Hearing those words, Wu Shi suddenly widened his eyes in realization. The royal palace was a cold-blooded place where blood brothers would murder one another for authority. For the most esteemed man in there, the emperor, to risk offending the master-teacher pavilion and pay such a heavy price just to save a mere official, that was indeed something worth looking deeper into. Since we know that there's something wrong with them, instead of stifling ourselves over here to figure out what they are up to, why don't we just release them temporarily and have them untie the dead knot for us before deciding on our next move? They might have captured King Zhongqing, but their clue effectively ended right there. However, if they were to let King Zhongqing go, it might just lead them to something unexpected. You're right, that's indeed a good solution. Coming to a realization, Wu Shi nodded his head in admiration. As expected of Principal Zhang. While he was still engrossed by the situation before him, the other party had already thought many steps ahead. At the current moment, their investigation had already hit a bottleneck. There was no more clue for them to look into, and even if they were to interrogate King Zhongqing and the others, there was no way the other party would reveal their plan to them. However, if they were to release their grasp and allow the other party to do as they pleased, it was likely that the other party would attempt something and give themselves away in the midst of doing so. Alright, I'll leave the rest to you. There's still some time before night time, and if it's convenient, I would like to pay a visit to the Master Teacher Pavilion's library to take a look. It would suffice to have Wu Shi deal with the investigation. It made no difference whether he participated in it or not. For the time being, his priority was to compile the Saint 3 Dan Heaven's Path Divine Art and raise his cultivation up to the required level, so that he could surpass that Zhang Jiuxiao and successfully claim the nomination slot to enter the Sanctum of Sages. Alright, I'll bring you over then. Knowing that Principal Zhang liked to read books, Wu Shi stood up with a smile to lead the way. At that moment, however, anxious knocking suddenly sounded on the door. Come in, Wu Shi said with a frown. The master teacher who had just left a moment ago rushed into the room with a panicked look. What's wrong? Wu Shi asked. For a 6-star master teacher to lose his bearings, there was no doubt that something huge must have happened. Teacher, bad news. Chen Zhehe has died. The master teacher gulped down a mouthful of saliva and said. Chen Zhe has died? Wu Shi narrowed his eyes in astonishment. Chen Zhe was the master teacher who had duped Zhang Yinqiu of the details concerning the ancient domain back then and leaked it to the otherworldly demonic tribe. He was the key to uncovering the other traitors within the Master Teacher Pavilion, and he had been locked in the most secure prison in the Master Teacher Pavilion, such that even his cultivation had been sealed. So, how could he suddenly pass away all of a sudden? I'm not too sure about the reason behind his death either. When I checked on him earlier in the morning, he was still perfectly fine. However, when I took another look at him while releasing King Zhongqing earlier, I realized that he has already breathed his last. The master teacher exclaimed anxiously. Chen Zhe was Vice Pavilion Master Tian's direct disciple, a 7-star low-tier master teacher. His abrupt death was no joking matter. Let's head over to take a look, Wu Shi said grimly. He turned to Zhang Xian and asked, Principal Zhang, will you follow me to take a look as well? The eyes of the young man before him was far more discerning than his own. The other party could very well notice something that he had missed out. All right. Zhang Xian nodded. He also found the matter perplexing as well. In the Master Teacher Pavilion's prison, putting aside killing any prisoner, even suicide should have been impossible, so how did Chen Zhe possibly lose his life there? This was truly eerie. Following behind the 6-star master teacher, it didn't take long for them to arrive at a cold chamber. In there, they saw a middle-aged man lying motionlessly on the ground, his body frigid cold. He had already breathed his last. Instead of walking over to assess the corpse, Zhang Xian first examined the surroundings instead. An airtight formation had been set up around the room, preventing one's spiritual perception from reaching in. As such, it was impossible to send any information in or out. It would be impossible for those within the chamber to communicate with those outside it. After which, Zhang Xian walked up to the corpse and activated his Eye of Insight. He doesn't have any physical wounds, but his soul has already dissipated entirely. Zhang Xian's eyes narrowed in astonishment. The cause of the other party's death was no other than the dissipation of his soul. His soul has dissipated entirely. Taken aback, Wu Shi quickly placed his hand on the other party's corpse to extend his consciousness into the other party's body. A moment later, his face turned livid. Clearly, he had come to the same conclusion as well. Could it be the same soul-nabbing technique as before? Frowning, a thought came into Zhang Xian's mind. Previously, Zhang Su of the Twin Bandits of the Northern Meadows had attempted to use a soul-nabbing technique to kill him, but the Spirit Awakener Guild's building had crushed him to death at that very moment, thus resulting in his failure. He had analyzed the soul-nabbing technique carefully after gaining possession of the other party's memory via soul search, and it bore striking resemblance to the means of the soul oracles. It aimed to draw a cultivator's soul out of his body and confine it, thus rendering him completely powerless to one's whims. Once the technique were to succeed, the body, left without a soul, would slowly wither away and die. Could Qinzhe have been killed using such a method? Could it be that Vicious has imparted this technique to someone else other than Sangsu? Zhang Xian contemplated doubtfully. However, even if that was the case, why would the practitioner of the technique want to go through the trouble of killing Qinzhe? Or could it be that Qinzhe had something to do with Vicious and the Soul Oracle as well? Let's bring his corpse over to Division Head Chiu of the Combat Master Hall and have him help us analyze the situation. After examining the corpse for a while longer, Wu Shi was still unable to make sense of the situation, so he stood up and said, "All right," the 6-star master teacher replied. Division Head Chiu was the head of the Soul Division, and he possessed deep knowledge in the study of souls. While Wu Shi might not be able to determine anything from the corpse, perhaps Division Head Chiu might be able to see something that they couldn't in it. There's no need for that. Zhang Xian shook his head. The soul within the corpse had already vanished, so there was no point in finding Division Head Chiu anymore. Principal Zhang. Wu Shi looked at Zhang Xian anxiously and said, "Qinzhe's death effectively means that we have lost our evidence to deal with Vice Pavilion Master Tian. Even though Vice Pavilion Master Tian has made a move on you, the evidence we have at the moment isn't sufficient to indict him for attempting to frame you. In other words, we don't have any reason to imprison him any longer." No matter what, Vice Pavilion Master Tian was a 7-star pinnacle master teacher, the vice head of the Master Teacher Pavilion. Previously, it was due to his direct disciple leaking critical intelligence to the otherworldly demonic tribe that he was implicated and imprisoned for the matter. However, with Qinzhe's death, there was no longer anyone who could possibly point Vice Pavilion Master Tian to be the culprit of the matter, so naturally they would have no reason why keep the other party imprisoned any longer. As for the crime of slandering and accusing Zhang Xian, he could dump it all onto King Zhongqing, and the remaining could be overlooked just on his prestigious identity in itself. Since we no longer have any right to imprison him, just let him go then. Zhang Xian shook his head. If not for the fact that he had discovered that there was a fatal flaw in Vice Pavilion Master Tian's primordial spirit through his Library of Heaven's path, which would hinder him from effectively executing any soul art, he would have truly doubted if Vice Pavilion Master Tian had killed his own student. Let him go. Wu Shi was taken aback. But Principal Zhang, the humiliation that you have suffered because of him. There's no need to be bothered about that matter. In view of Vice Pavilion Master Tian's standing, it won't do us any good to keep him imprisoned for an extended period of time, especially when we don't have sufficient evidence on hand. Furthermore, it hasn't been long since you have been promoted to a Vice Pavilion Master yourself, so you can't afford to forcefully make a move against Vice Pavilion Master Tian yet. Zhang Xian shook his head and said. At the current moment, it was imperative for them that Wu Shi remained in power. Otherwise, they would be powerless to stand against Vice Pavilion Master Tian. All right then. Seeing that there was some sense in what Zhang Xian said, Wu Shi could only reluctantly nod in agreement. Then what should we do next? What do you think that we should do? Zhang Xian returned the question with a smile. I think that we should announce Qinzhe's crimes publicly and turn everyone against Vice Pavilion Master Tian. This would put Vice Pavilion Master Tian in a disadvantageous position, and we would be in a better position to make a move against him. Wu Shi contemplated for a moment before saying. The news regarding Qinzhe's betrayal was currently known by only a very small group. If they could pin a crime on Qinzhe at this moment, Vice Pavilion Master Tian, as Qinzhe's teacher, would be placed in a precarious position as well. Otherwise, Vice Pavilion Master Tian would truly be getting away scot-free from the entire matter. Wrong. That course of action won't work. Zhang Xian shook his head. It won't work? What should we do then? Wu Shi was taken aback. Simple. We should have Qinzhe buried with the grandest of master-teacher ceremonies. On top of that, we will compensate his family and accord them with the highest compliments. We shall dub him as a true master teacher, the role model whom everyone should learn from. Zhang Xian replied with a mysterious smile. Ah. What kind of solution is that? Wu Shi was stunned by Zhang Xian's unexpected suggestion. Chapter 1162, The Poisoned King. Zhongqing Chenjie was the person who revealed the intelligence from Zhang Yinqiu to the otherworldly demonic tribe, causing the latter to nearly be unable to return from the Qiu Wu Palace. A person like him should be deeply condemned by the Master-Teacher Pavilion, and yet, Principal Zhang was proposing to offer the highest of compliments to him? This was too bizarre. On the other hand, seeing that Wu Shi didn't comprehend what he was driving at, Zhang Xian shook his head and explained, at this point, Chenjie's crimes are only known to a handful within the Master-Teacher Pavilion. This is actually disadvantageous to us. In order to officially indict Chenjie of a crime and justify his arrest, we'll need to convince the entire Master-Teacher Pavilion of our case, and that would require more evidence than just old Principal Zhang Yinqiu's testimony. However, that is one thing that we are lacking at the moment. If we were to disregard that and forcefully pin an accusation on Chenjie, it will appear as if we are trying to conceal our depraved actions instead. On top of that, the fact that Chenjie has even passed away in the Master-Teacher Pavilion plays against us as well. Think about it, we have captured Chenjie, but Chenjie ended up dying in captivity. What do you think the others would think about the matter? Wu Shi fell silent. It was normal for others to sympathize with the weak, but whether the weak was truly weak or not was often one thing that couldn't be clearly seen on the surface. If they were to really attempt to pin a crime on Chenjie, as long as someone were to work behind their backs and fabricate a story to accuse Wu Shi of abusing his authority to deal with Chenjie, the common populace would be unable to discern which point of view was true. In such situations, the tendency was for them to naturally sympathize with the victim, Chenjie. By then, the tables would be turned. Their advantageous situation would turn into a deeply disadvantageous one in an instant. On the other hand, if we were to declare that he has died and bestow his family with huge riches for the matter, the other party might think that news has been leaked and panic. By then the other party might very well do something that would give themselves away. As long as we can lure the other party out, the rest would be simple. As for Chenjie, it wouldn't be too late to indict him of his crime then. Zhang Xian said. I see. Wu Shi came to a realization. That was indeed the best plan they had at the moment. Not only would it resolve the adverse effects brought about by Chenjie's death, it could also potentially bait the other party out. Truly two birds in a stone. I'll have it done now. Nodding, Wu Shi quickly turned to the 6-star master teacher beside him to issue instructions. What else should we do? After making arrangements, Wu Shi asked once more. For the time being, this should be enough. Tonight, we'll still be attending the appraisal convention that you spoke about. Don't worry, we have already placed the bait dangling before them. Now, we just have to wait to hook something up. Zhang Xian smiled. Wu Shi nodded before falling silent. After leaving Chenjie's cell, Zhang Xian headed straight for the Master-Teacher Pavilion's library. With Wu Shi's identity token in his hand, he was qualified to access the Saint 3 Dan and Saint 4 Dan cultivation techniques in there. In less than 2 hours, he had already collected everything into his library of Heaven's Path. After that was done, he took out the books which Emperor Chu Tianqing had given him and collected them into his library of Heaven's Path too. Compile. The library of Heaven's Path jolted, and 2 new books materialized before Zhang Xian's eyes. They were the Saint 3 Dan and Saint 4 Dan Heaven's Path Divine Art. Swiftly browsing through them, Zhang Xian's eyes lit up in excitement. They have both reached the level of Heaven's Path. I can cultivate them straight now. This seemed to be the first time he had collected the Heaven's Path Divine Art for 2 realms in advance. With these 2, he would be able to make a breakthrough on the spot to Saint 4 Dan Primordial Spirit Realm. However, the sky seems to be getting dark. I should first head over to the appraisal convention with Wu Shi before cultivating. Zhang Xian glanced out of the windows and saw that the sun had already set. The appraisal convention that Wu Shi had mentioned previously should be starting anytime soon, so he couldn't afford to spend any time on cultivation for the time being. Thus, He stretched his back lazily and walked out of the library. In any case, everything would be simple once he had the required cultivation techniques. At most, it would only take him 2 hours or so, or at the very worst, 4 hours either way, he could have it done very quickly. Besides, there was no such thing as a cultivation bottleneck to him. Once he cultivated, the technique would surely reach the mastery of consummation. Thus, for the time being, it was more imperative for him to bring all of his supporting occupations to 7-star and become a 7-star master teacher first. Principal Zhang, let's set forth. Wu Shi said with a smile upon seeing Zhang Xian walking towards him. After which, the duo headed out together. While Zhang Xian and Wu Shi were heading to the appraisal convention, in a vast hall in the royal palace, damn it. King Zhongqing paced around the room as he clenched his teeth tightly in fury. Hatred burned within his eyes like raging inferno, as if they would burn down everything in its sight. Enough. You sure have gotten brazen to attempt to make a move against a 6-star master teacher without making ample preparations. Chu Tianqing harumphed coldly. Your Majesty, I. King Zhongqing quickly clasped his fist to explain himself. Forget it, you don't have to explain anything to me. Just learn from this lesson and make sure that you never commit it in the future. Know that it took me a heavy price to bail you out. Chu Tianqing waved his hand impatiently. I apologize for my inept. King Zhongqing lowered his head and said. All right, that's enough of that. For the next few days, you should remain in my royal palace to cultivate and reflect on where you have gone wrong. During this timing, you can't afford to have anyone finding any more handle on you, or else no one will be able to save you. Chu Tianqing instructed. Yes. King Zhongqing nodded. Don't worry, there shouldn't be any more problems. The main issue at hand lies with that Zhang Xian, he really isn't an easy fellow to deal with. Furthermore, his cultivation is much higher than we have previously anticipated. As King Zhongqing spoke about Zhang Xian, he couldn't help but grit his teeth furiously. However, as soon as he said those words, his face suddenly paled, and his body began shaking uncontrollably. This is bad. King Zhongqing narrowed his eyes as goosebumps rose all over his body. What's wrong? Chu Tianqing frowned. I have been poisoned. Pooh. King Zhongqing's body began convulsing non-stop, and large mouthfuls of blood spurted from his mouth. He felt as if all of his organs were about to shatter any time soon. Poisoned? How did you get poisoned? Chu Tianqing's eyes widened in alarm. King Xingqing had been beside him for the last few minutes, so how could he be suddenly poisoned without any warning? I have no idea either. The immense pain rendered King Zhongqing incapable of standing on his feet, and he rolled around the ground wildly, hoping that it would alleviate his pain somehow. Cold sweat trickled down his entire body, and no matter how he contemplated over the matter, he simply couldn't recall when he was afflicted with the poison. Did you eat or drink anything today? Chu Tianqing asked anxiously. For even King Zhongqing, a Saint 4 Dan pinnacle expert, to be unable to tolerate it, the poison was truly fearsome. An individual who had such a potent poison in his possession and could poison King Zhongqing without the latter noticing had to be a 7-star pinnacle poison master at the very least. But if such a figure had appeared by King Zhongqing's side, he would have known it. Why did he have no impression of it whatsoever? Today, King Zhongqing began recalling everything that had happened earlier, that Zhang Xian has fed me several gourds of fine wine, and that Sun Chang has sprinkled salt and pepper over my body. There couldn't be anything wrong with the food in his King Zhongqing manner, and he hadn't touched the food in the Master-Teacher Pavilion either. The only thing left was Zhang Xian's wine and Sun Chang's condiments. Sprinkled salt and pepper over your body? Chu Tianqing was stunned. What the heck was that? However, he knew that this wasn't the time to be asking about that. With a deep frown, he remarked, from the looks of it, the culprit seems to be that Zhang Xian. Just that, what kind of poison is this? Men, summon royal physician Sun over. Yes. A guard quickly bowed and rushed out of the room. Not too long later, an elder entered the hall. Your Majesty. Royal physician's son, King Zhongqing has been poisoned, and I would like you to analyze what kind of poison it is and treat him. Chu Tianqing instructed. Royal physician's son was a 7-star pinnacle physician specially employed by the royal court, and his comprehension of the way of medicine had already reached a profound level. If anyone could treat King Zhongqing, it had to be him. Your Majesty, rest assured, as long as the poison isn't beyond grade 7, I'm confident that I'll be able to resolve it easily. Royal physician's son smiled, revealing a row of perfectly yellow teeth. With a flick of his finger, he swiftly weaved his jinqi into thin threads, which swiftly wrapped itself around King Zhongqing in the shape of a sphere. This was his exclusive diagnosis and treatment method, sonar diagnosis cocoon. By linking his jinqi threads to the vitals and acupoints of the patient, he would be able to take a closer examination on the patient's condition through the vibrations through the jinqi threads, and thus, making an accurate diagnosis of the patient's condition. There's something really weird about the poison. Royal physician's son analyzed King Zhongqing's condition for a moment, and a deep frown surfaced on his forehead. Weird? Chu Tianqing's face darkened. Can he be treated? Your Majesty, rest assured. Even though the poison is elusive and nearly indiscernible, I should be able to figure what is going on by sending my jinqi threads into King Zhongqing's body through the jinqi thread diagnosis method, and from that, resolve the poison. Physician's son said confidently. Hurry up then. Seeing King Zhongqing's face turn ghastly pale, as if he would succumb to the poison at any moment, Chu Tianqing urged. Yes. Royal physician's son nodded. Taking a deep breath, he flicked his fingers forward. Tzzzzzzzzzz. A surge of jinqi shot from his fingers into King Zhongqing's glabella, and it swiftly dived its way into the latter's meridians. The jinqi thread diagnosis method involved sending jinqi threads into the body of the patient to examine the latter's inner condition to determine the source of the injury or illness, thus allowing the physician to treat the issue at its root. Since the sonar diagnosis cocoon wasn't sufficient to determine the lethal poison which King Zhongqing was suffering from, he could only resort to this method. Before long, his jinqi had already made its way around the King Zhongqing's body, but there was still no lethal poison to be seen. Perplexed, royal physician's son retracted his jinqi and contemplated with a deep frown. He had checked every nook and cranny within King Zhongqing's body, but there was not a trace of any poison to be seen. Yet, the other party's internal organs were corroding, clearly the doing of a lethal poison. These contradicting situations had left him deeply bewildered. How is it? Chu Tianxing asked anxiously. There's something really bizarre about the poison. I need some time to think of a solution. Halfway through his words, royal physician's son's face suddenly turned ghastly pale. His body abruptly fell heavily onto the ground before convulsing wildly. Huge mouthfuls of blood spurted wildly from his mouth, rendering his face a shade paler each time. Darn it, I was poisoned as well. As he said those words, his body convulsed a few more times before he passed out altogether. This. Chu Tianqing was astonished. It was just a moment ago that the other party declared confidently that he would be able to resolve the poison, and yet, before he could even determine what kind of poison it was, he had already passed out. The other party was already the most formidable physician in the royal palace, but he still ended up succumbing to the poison. Against a lethal poison which could affect even a 7-star pinnacle physician unknowingly, what could they possibly do? Your Majesty, I have a handful of poison masters imprisoned in my manor. Bring one of them over. King Zhongqing uttered weakly. Hold on, I'll send my men to bring them over. Chu Tianqing said before turning to his men to issue some commands. Under the orders of the emperor, the guards swiftly made their way over to the King Zhongqing manor, and not too long later, they returned with a black-robed young man. He was no other than Butler Qin. Old Master, the poison masters in the residence has been released by Zhang Xian. Released? Pooh. At this point, King Zhongqing was already withered internally and externally. At this moment, he didn't even have the strength to move around anymore, as if an old man languishing on his deathbed. There are no poison masters left, and the physicians aren't capable of treating it either. I'll go look for Zhang Shi personally. To think that a master teacher would actually resort to such underhanded tricks. Chu Tianqing roared lividly. He had to pay such a heavy price in order to bail King Zhongqing out. If the latter were to die of poison shortly after, wouldn't his Qingyuan royal family become a laughingstock of the populace? Zhang Shi. Poison. Upon hearing those words, Butler Qin swiftly turned to Chu Tianqing and asked with his head lowered, "Your Majesty, was our old master poisoned by Zhang Xian?" It must be him. No one else had a chance to strike other than him. Chu Tianqing harumphed in anger. If he's the one behind the poison. Butler Qin paused for a brief moment as confidence emerged on his face. I know how to alleviate the poison. Chapter 1163, Butler Qin's unique poison neutralization technique, you know? Chu Tianqing and King Zhongqing looked at Butler Qin in bewilderment. It was a poison that even the 7-star pinnacle royal physician's son was helpless before, even passing out after being afflicted with the poison himself, so how could a butler who didn't know the slightest thing about poison possibly know how to alleviate it? To be honest, I was also afflicted with the poison a while back, but I managed to keep it under control using a certain method, Butler Qin replied. Hearing that his subordinate had been poisoned by Zhang Xian as well but managed to overcome the poison, King Zhongqing immediately exclaimed, "Is that true? What are you waiting for then? Hurry up and treat me." "Yes, old master. The treatment might be a little painful, so I ask you to bear with it," Butler Qin said grimly as he stepped forward. "I have been through innumerable life and death situations. What kind of pain have I not suffered before? Rest assured and do it." King Zhongqing replied proudly. Back in his time, he had charged into many a battlefield and survived against the odds. No matter how painful a poison neutralization process was, how could it compare to the experiences he had been through on the battlefield? "As long as you are able to cure my poison, I'll immediately promote you to the official head butler of my manor, granting you authority to mobilize anyone within the manor." Before King Zhongqing could finish his words, he suddenly saw a palm enlarging swiftly before him, covering his entire sight in an instant. "Pa!" The slap struck King Zhongqing's face squarely, and the stinging pain threatened to tear his cheeks into two. "You!" Not expecting his subordinate to slap him instead of treating him, King Zhongqing felt so furious that he was on the brink of insanity. However, before he could even finish his words, another slap had already flown right for his face. "Pa! Pa! Pa! Pa!" A series of consecutive slaps left King Zhongqing's face swelling up as if a crimson bun. Butler Qin had exerted his full strength in those slaps, such that he was already panting from exhaustion. He carefully raised his gaze and looked at King Zhongqing. "Old master, are you feeling better now? Better your head. You bastard, I'm going to kill you." With his eyes reddening in rage, King Zhongqing stood up with a belligerent air around him. To think that he, the first king of the Qingyuan Empire, would actually be pummeled by his own subordinate, not to mention, in front of Emperor Chu Tianqing at that. And as if that was not enough, the other party even had the cheek to ask him if he was feeling better after. Better your head. That is as good as a rapist asking his victim if it felt good. I'm going to beat you into the ground, you bastard. King Zhongqing was so furious that it also seemed as if smoke was pouring out of his head. You still aren't feeling better yet? Old master, worry not. I still have another trick up my sleeve. On the other hand, Butler Qin didn't expect the slaps to not work, so he hurriedly tried to appease the other party first. You still have another trick up your sleeve? King Zhongqing was taken aback for a moment upon hearing those words. Before he could even process what was going on, he saw Butler Qin taking off his shoes, and in the next moment, a leg emanating an exceptional scent flew right toward his face. Pang! The impact of the kick left King Zhongqing's face distorted into the shape of a fried dough twist before he flipped around 2.5 times in the air and collapsed heavily onto the ground. Butler Qin had experimented on himself when he found the effectiveness of the slaps a little lacking, and he had to admit that the kick did have miraculous effects against the poison. In an instant, the pain vanished from his body like a receding tide. He had been planning on treasuring this secret art as his family heirloom, vowing to only pass it down to those of his lineage. However, since the old master required it, he had no choice but to take it out. "I'll kill you." Seeing the teeth that had dropped to the ground and the amazing stench that filled his nostrils, King Zhongqing nearly went insane on the spot. He had ordered his subordinate to treat his poison, but not only did the latter do nothing of that sort, the latter even dared to slap and kick him. Unforgivable. Standing up furiously, he glared at his subordinate with a piercing glare, ready to tear the fellow before him into two. But before he could make a move, Chu Tianqing suddenly spoke. "King Zhongqing, your poison has been cured." "Poison?" Those abrupt words jolted King Zhongqing out of his rampage. All of a sudden, he realized that the pain from the lethal poison had really receded after the slaps and kick. Overwhelmed by astonishment, the rage from a moment ago completely vanished from his mind. He quickly asked Butler Qin in bewilderment, "What is going on?" Butler Qin clasped his fist and explained the matter. "Old master, earlier today, when you asked me to invite Zhang Xian over to the manor, we had a small verbal conflict, and he discreetly planted a poison in me. I had a physician look at the poison, and the latter said that not only is the poison indiscernible, it will even corrode one's inner organs, putting one in unbearable agony. However, he did inform me of a way to alleviate the poison, and that is to hit one's face. The more vicious the strike is, the more effective it will be against the poison. That's also why I brazenly made a move against you, and I beg for your pardon." "The poison is alleviated through slapping? There's actually such a poison in the world?" King Zhongqing and Chu Tianqing glanced at one another in disbelief. They had never encountered or heard of such a bizarre poison in the world. "That's right." Butler Qin replied affirmatively. "To actually concoct such a poison, that Zhang Xian sure is a depraved individual." King Zhongqing's lips twitched furiously as he cursed, but halfway through his words, his body suddenly jolted. He felt that excruciating pain from before slowly returning to his body. "This is bad, it's acting up once more. Quick, hit me again." Recalling that unbearable pain, King Zhongqing could not help but tremble in fear. He never wanted to experience such a sensation ever again. He quickly pulled Butler Qin over as he stuck his face out to the other party and exclaimed in desire, "Harder! To think that it could work this way as well." Shortly after walking out of the master-teacher pavilion, Zhang Xian suddenly chuckled beneath his breath. Wu Shi turned around and asked, "Is there something wrong?" "It's nothing," Zhang Xian replied calmly with a smile. When he had been curing King Zhongqing's wounds earlier in the latter's manner, he had secretly slipped a sliver of his will into the other party's body. It was concealed within his heaven's path Shinchi, making it difficult for even a primordial spirit realm expert to notice it. He had made it such that in fixed intervals or whenever the other party insulted him, the heaven's path Shinchi would turn into lethal poison and ravage the other party's body. It was precisely because he had left such a hand that he did not hesitate to have King Zhongqing released. In any case, King Zhongqing's life and death hinged on a single thought of his, so it mattered not whether the other party was imprisoned or not. Initially, he had only chosen to spare Butler Qin in case he might require a pawn to use in the near future, but who would have thought that the latter would actually end up believing in his face-slapping treatment method? That actually worked to his advantage for the time being, so he decided to go along with it. After all, even though he had set King Zhongqing free for the moment, he was still more than willing to see the other party suffer, especially after seeing with his own eyes what the other party had done to Sun Chang and the Poison Hall. Under the control of the sliver of will he had slipped into the other party's body, he was able to create the impression that slapping one's face would be able to alleviate the corrosion of the poison. Of course, The slapping would not actually cure the poison. In truth, the heaven's path Xinqi was just switched back from its poisonous state temporarily. The poison would recede under vicious slapping and act up if the slapping were to halt for some time. He could probably entertain himself for quite a few days with that. However, it was another question whether King Zhongqing would be able to last that long or not. After communicating with the will that he had hidden within the other party's body for a moment, Zhang Xian decided to put aside the matter and follow behind Wu Shi. Not too long later, they arrived at a massive trading hall. Zhang Xian took a look at the surroundings, and after confirming his location, he could not help but ask in bewilderment, "Isn't this where the appraiser hall is located?" Based on the directions from Hall Master Xing, the location they were currently at should have been the appraiser hall, so why was a huge trading hall standing before them instead? You should also know about how intricately linked the appraiser hall is with trade. Many businesses rise in the vicinity of its establishment, so it was inevitable that it eventually developed into a trading hall, Wu Shi explained with a smile. That's true. Zhang Xian nodded. Appraisers were capable of determining the authenticity of artifacts, and in the master-teacher continent, authenticity had always been a problem for both buyers and sellers alike. Receiving an appraiser's certificate on a good was equivalent to having a guarantee on the quality of the good, and naturally, sellers would be able to sell it at a higher price. At the same time, knowing that the authenticity of the good had been verified by an expert, buyers could also purchase it with their mind at ease. Thus, it was inevitable that businesses would gradually sprout in the vicinity of the appraiser guild, and as time passed, a trading hall would be constructed around it, thus becoming the center of commerce within the city. Actually, there is something that has been on my mind for quite some time already. If I'm not mistaken, the appraisal convention that you spoke of should be an event to verify the authenticity of precious artifacts. However, if that's the case, why would the head of the Painter Guild attend the convention as well? Zhang Xian asked. Since the main focus of the event was appraising, it was peculiar that those of another occupation would be there as well. As you know, appraisers deal with artifacts of all sorts. Tonight, one of the artifacts that will be appraised is a painting left behind by the sorrowless old man, Wu Shi explained. Sorrowless old man? He's the most famous painter in the history of the Qingyuan Empire. An extremely talented individual, he was an 8-star painter before he reached 300 years old. Unfortunately, on the third day after his 300th birthday, he vanished without a trace. As for where he went, no one knows for sure. However, there are rumors that he was killed by his enemies, Wu Shi explained. 300 years old? Isn't that age considered young for Saint Realm cultivators? Why would others address him as the sorrowless old man? Zhang Xian asked in confusion. Even Hall Master Xing and Wu Shi were at least 500 years old. In comparison, 300 years could really be considered young among Saint Realm cultivators, so that title seemed to be a little inappropriate. It is said that in the earlier years of the sorrowless old man, his talents in cultivation and painting were unexceptional. Even as he approached 180, he was still nowhere near to reaching Saint Realm. However, his talents suddenly blossomed one day. Within a short 10 years, his mastery in painting surged all the way to 7-star, and he managed to advance his cultivation to Saint Realm as well. Nevertheless, due to his late breakthrough, he still retained his old appearance despite his lengthened lifespan, and it was because of his old appearance that others addressed him as the sorrowless old man, Wu Shi explained. I see. Zhang Xian nodded. The average lifespan of a transcendent mortal was around 200, and typically speaking, a 180 years old transcendent mortal cultivator stood no chance of achieving a breakthrough at all. To suddenly be enlightened in the way of painting and successfully advance to sainthood at his age, it must be said that the sorrowless old man was indeed a legend. While chatting, the duo entered the trading hall. The trading hall was far larger than Zhang Xian had expected. There were all sorts of artifacts on display, and a huge crowd was walking back and forth between the vendors, seeking the items they required. Curious, Zhang Xian activated his eye of insight and scanned through the array of items on display. A while later, he could not help but shake his head in disappointment. There were a couple of items that could be considered a treasure to transcendent mortal cultivators, but to him, they were completely useless. Most of the items on the first floor of the trading hall are miscellaneous goods that have not yet been appraised, so they are relatively inexpensive. Most of those on this floor loiter with the hopes of stumbling on a treasure. It would be best if they could hit the jackpot, but even if they do not, they won't make a big loss either, Wuxia said. It's from the second floor onwards that the artifacts have been appraised. While their prices are slightly pricier, there's at least a guarantee on the authenticity of the goods. Does Principal Zhang want to take a look around the trading hall first? Zhang Xian shook his head. There's no need for that. What he lacked the most at that moment was concentrated high-tier spirit stones. Other than that, there was not any particular artifact that he required. As for medicinal herbs, ores, and the sort, he had already gotten what he needed from Emperor Chu Tianqing, so there was no need for him to go to the trouble of purchasing them. Since there was nothing he required, there was no need for him to browse through the items in the trading hall either. Since that's the case, let's head straight for the 5th floor then. The appraisal convention is being held there. Nodding with a smile, Wu Shi led the way forward. Walking through the crowd, it did not take long for them to arrive on the 5th floor. Instead of stores, there was a vast hall on the 5th floor. Before Zhang Xian could enter the hall, he suddenly spotted 2 men walking over, and upon seeing one of their faces, he could not help but halt for an instant. The person was none other than the young man whom he had encouraged earlier in the day, the offspring of the Zhang clan, Zhang Jiuxiao. Chapter 1164, Evocative Vividness. Dressed in a light green robe, Zhang Jiuxiao had a look deeply reminiscent of a scholar. Pinned on his chest was not the emblem of a master teacher but that of an appraiser, and the 7 stars gleaming on the emblem signified the outstanding skills he had in the field. The one that came along with him was an elder who appeared to be in his 60s. The aura that he emanated revealed his Saint For Dan cultivation, and there was a 7-star appraiser emblem on his chest as well. That fellow is an appraiser as well. Zhang Xian was taken aback. Having witnessed Zhang Jiuxiao conducting calligraphy in the air, he knew that the latter possessed exceptional proficiency in painting. He had not expected the latter to be a 7-star appraiser as well. As expected of the number 1 genius of the Qingyuan Empire, he was indeed no simple figure. Upon seeing the elder, Wu Shi quickly walked up to him and greeted with a smile, "Guild leader Mu, it has been long since we last met. Wu Rufeng, were you not going to pay me a visit if I didn't send you the invitation to the appraisal convention? Have you long forgotten about the many years of friendship between us?" The elder patted Wu Shi's shoulders and berated him jokingly. "Of course not. I was already planning to pay you a visit but then you sent me the invitation," Wu Shi replied with a smile. Hearing the conversation between the two, Zhang Xian noted internally, this elder seems to be the head of the appraiser hall. Considering the 7-star appraiser emblem and how Wu Shi addressed the other party, it was not too difficult to figure out the other party's identity. While he was assessing the guild leader before him, Zhang Xian suddenly felt a gaze falling on him. Raising his head, he saw Zhang Jiuxiao staring at him with a slight hint of enmity in his eyes. To be honest, the hostility the other party emanated was so vague that it would have been nearly indiscernible for anyone else, but with his soul depth of 25.1, which was comparable to an 8-star master teacher, it was still rather easy for him to perceive it. He is hostile toward me. Why? I don't think I have offended him before. Zhang Xian was perplexed. The both of them had only met once back on the heart-tempering bridge, and he had even cheered the other party on with a, "You can do it." It was one thing for the other party not to reciprocate his goodwill, but to carry enmity against him on top of that, what the heck was the other party up to? Just as Zhang Xian was lamenting how difficult it was to be a good person nowadays, the young man walked up to him and clasped his fist. "I am Zhang Jiuxiao, how may I address you?" "I am Zhang Xian." "Zhang Xian. Are you the newly appointed principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy? I have heard much of your talent. Upon hearing the name, Zhang Jiuxiao came to a realization. It's no wonder you possess such exceptional mental fortitude, being able to cross the heart-tempering bridge with ease. It's indeed impossible to govern an entire academy without an exceptional state of mind. He had been wondering whom the 6-star master teacher who had broken his record was, and upon learning of the other party's identity, he felt as if the burden in his heart had been lifted. He had heard bits and pieces of Zhang Xian's affairs, and the latter was indeed worthy of being considered a prodigy among geniuses. However, the other party was still only a 6-star master teacher, no matter how talented he was. Against him, a true 7-star master teacher, the other party was clearly still far from a match. It's due to the appreciation of the teachers and students in the academy that I accepted the position of the principal in the first place. To be honest with you, I am intending to resign soon, Zhang Xian replied humbly. Since the old principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, Zhang Yinqiu, had returned, he had been wanting to step down, just that the others had been unwilling to accept his resignation. Resign? Well, I guess that's to be expected. Despite your talent, your young age still limits your experience. It wouldn't reflect too well on the academy to have a master teacher as young as you as its principal. Zhang Jiuxiao nodded in agreement. Not expecting his words of humility to be taken for real, Zhang Xian shook his head with a helpless smile. It was the norm in such social settings to keep up pleasantries. More than manners, it was a sign of politeness and respect for the other party. He could tell that Zhang Jiuxiao was trying to put him down, and while he would not go to the extent of getting into a squabble with the other party over something as inconsequential as this, he was not interested in putting up with it either. Thus, he chose to take his leave instead. However, before he could do so, the other party continued speaking. Since Wu Shi has brought you to this appraisal convention, it must mean that he has a high opinion of you. Is Zhang Shi an appraiser as well? Out of politeness, Zhang Xian replied, yes, I have learned a little bit of appraising in my spare time. May I know what your current rank in it is? Zhang Jiuxiao asked curiously. I am currently a 5-star appraiser, replied Zhang Xian nonchalantly. The previous appraiser hall that he had been to was in Honghai City of the Myriad Kingdom Alliance. Over there, the highest emblem he could receive was only 5-star, so he had been stuck with it until now. 5-star. I see. Given your current age, it's actually not too bad. At the very least, it does show that you have some talent in the field. As long as you work diligently on it, it might be possible for you to overtake me in the future. Zhang Jiuxiao nodded. To tell you the truth, 5-star appraisers are actually unqualified to attend the appraisal convention, but it seems like Wu Shi has specially brought you here to expand your horizons. Seems so, Zhang Xian replied casually. Zhang Jiuxiao nodded before continuing. The appraisal convention this time around is far grander than the previous few. The appraiser hall has invited many leading figures in their own occupation this time around, so it's very likely that a few valuable treasures might appear later on. Since it's fate that we have met, and the both of us have the same surname, Zhang, why don't you follow behind me later on, and I'll show you around. If there's anything you don't recognize or know of, you can ask me. We are all master teachers, and as your senior in the field of appraising, it's only right for me to offer you a few pointers here. Hopefully, my words will be of some help to you in pushing for a breakthrough to 6-star. I'll be counting on you then, Zhang Xian replied. It did not seem like the other party had any bad intentions in mind, so Zhang Xian did not think that there was any need to create unnecessary acrimony between them. There's no need to stand on ceremony. While I am a master teacher as well, I have devoted quite a bit of my time to studying appraising, and I do have some reputation of my own in the Qingyuan Empire Appraisal Hall as well, Zhang Jiuxiao replied calmly, but the slight hint of pride in his tone was unconcealable. He had been feeling rather traumatized by the other party after the affairs at the heart-tempering bridge, so he could not help but feel exceptionally refreshed after returning the favor. Zhang Xian nodded. He was just about to speak when Wu Shi and guild leader Mu suddenly both turned their sights over, and the latter spoke with a smile on his face. I was too busy speaking earlier that I forgot to introduce him to you both. As all of you are master teachers, I believe that I need not specially introduce him. Zhang Jiuxiao over here has studied appraising under me for 3 years, and within this short period of time, he has already achieved 7-star proficiency in the occupation. His talent in this field is truly fearsome, an outstanding youth indeed. Wu Shi nodded upon hearing those words before saying, Guild leader Mu, this young man over here is my friend, Zhang Xian. Don't underestimate him just because of his young age, he's truly an exceptional genius. He was previously intending to look for you to take the appraiser examination, but since we coincidentally met one another here, I thought that it would be good to introduce him to you. Your friend? I thought that he is your junior. Guild leader Mu was taken aback. Wu Shi was almost 800 this year, so he had automatically assumed that the 20-year-old lad whom he had brought with him to the appraisal convention would be a new student that he had accepted recently or a close junior. Who would have thought that the other party was his friend instead? The fact that Wu Shi chose to address the young man as his peer showed how high an evaluation he had of the other party's capability. Principal Zhang is a man of great talent. It's already a great honor for me to have him as my friend, so how could he possibly be my junior? Wu Shi quickly waved his hand to deny the claim. The young man before him was a celestial master teacher and a celestial saint. To be honest, he already felt as if he was being a little conceited to address the other party as his friend, so he nearly died of a heart attack when guild leader Mu asked if the other party was his student. Oh. Noting that his old friend was not say those words out of humility, guild leader Mu could not help but take another good look at Zhang Xian, and the casual attitude he took before slowly turned into graveness. A friend of Wu Shi is a friend of mine too. Principal Zhang, feel free to look for me if you ever require any help concerning appraising. Having known Wu Shi for many years, guild leader Mu knew that the other party was an austere man who viewed formalities with grave importance. The fact that he was willing to address a person as young as Principal Zhang with such deep respect showed that the latter was no ordinary figure. Zhang Xian clasped his fist and replied, Guild leader Mu, you are being too polite. There's no need to stand on ceremony with me. Wu Shi and I have been close friends for many years. Guild leader Mu said with a smile. He turned to Zhang Jiuxiao and said, Jiuxiao, I know that the both of you are around the same age, but since Principal Zhang is a friend of mine, you will have to address him as senior uncle. Alright, hurry up and greet him. Zhang Jiuxiao nearly vomited blood. He reluctantly voiced those 2 words from his mouth. Senior. Uncle. It was just a moment ago that he had said that he would show the other party around the appraisal convention to teach the other party a thing or two. His face turned so red that it looked as if he would burst into flames at any moment. Guild leader Mu nodded. Wu Shi and brother Zhang, it seems like most of the guests have arrived. Allow me to bring you 2 to your seats. Alright. Wu Shi nodded. Thus, the group began making their way into the hall. The hall spanned roughly 30 meters from one end to the other, and there was a long rectangular table stationed at the very center. Both ends of the tables were already surrounded with all kinds of finely dressed gentlemen and ladies, and most of them seemed to be roughly around the age of guild leader Mu. Zhang Xian spotted 2 familiar figures amid the crowd, guild leader One of the Spirit Awakener Guild and guild leader Wei of the Terpsichore Guild. Guild leader Mu first brought Wu Shi and Zhang Xian to their seats before heading to the principal seat of the rectangular table and gestured to them. Alright, please take a seat. Zhang Xian and Wu Shi sat down side by side. Zhang Jiuxiao also walked up to one of the seats as well, but guild leader Mu frowned at that moment and said, Jiuxiao, you shall stand behind me. Yes. Zhang Jiuxiao's face twitched slightly, but he quickly nodded and took his place behind guild leader Mu. He was initially thinking that with his standing as a 7-star appraiser, he would at least be able to vie back some dignity from the other party, but who would have thought that before he could really do anything, he would already be suppressed to the point where he could hardly raise his head before the other party. After settling everyone into their seats, Guild Leader Mu looked at the person sitting on the other end and said, "Since everyone is here, my friend over there, can you take out your artifact now?" That person was wearing a copper mask, making it impossible to distinguish his facial features. Nevertheless, from his skin, one could roughly tell that his external appearance should be one of a middle-aged man in his late 40s. Everyone present here is a reputable figure of Qingyuan City, and I see that even Vice Pavilion Master Wu is here today, so naturally, I have no qualms regarding your credibility. However, I think that there is still a need for me to put the ugly words at the forefront and make my stand clear. I only wish for my artifact to be appraised so as to decipher the secret hidden within it. Regardless of what is discovered in the process, I wish to make it very clear that I have no intentions of selling my artifact to anyone else. However, be assured that I will handsomely reward those who help me in deciphering it, the copper-masked figure said. His voice was slightly scratchy, a sign indicating that he had intentionally altered his voice so that no one would be able to recognize him. Rest assured, the friends that I have invited to the appraisal convention this time around are trustworthy individuals. Guild Leader Mu nodded. The copper-masked figure nodded. I trust Guild Leader Mu's judgment. He flicked his wrist, and a scroll appeared in his hands. He unfurled it carefully, and a beautiful scene opened up before everyone's eyes. A lush mountain peak filled with the cries of birds and beasts alike was paired with a tranquil flowing river. It was a calming sight. The crowd found themselves unable to distinguish whether the sight before them was true or not. It was as if a mountain was truly erected not too far from where they were, and they could even vaguely feel a warm, humid breeze on their faces. This is evocative vividness, the work of an 8-star painter. Upon seeing the painting, an elder rose to his feet in agitation. His eyes reddened, and his body trembled uncontrollably. Putting together the fact that he was wearing the robe of a painter and the 7 gleaming stars on his painter emblem, it was likely that he was the head of the painter guild whom Wu Shi had spoken of previously. Evocative vividness? Zhang Xian asked in confusion. Evocative vividness is the ability of an 8-star painter. Those who have achieved this realm are able to produce paintings that are extremely lifelike, making it extremely difficult to discern it from reality. A painting that has achieved such a level is capable of absorbing spiritual energy in order to sustain the spirit within and even cultivate. With sufficient time, it might even be able to leap out of the painting and exist as an independent life form. Wu Shi explained with a suppressed voice. So formidable. Zhang Xian was astonished. He discreetly activated his eye of insight in order to assess the painting before his eyes closely. Chapter 1165, The Proud Zhang Jiuxiao. Without taking a closer look at the painting, it would appear as if one was watching the scenery through one's windows, a little distant but nevertheless clear. Through the eye of insight, Zhang Xian was able to perceive the details of the painting with greater clarity, and to his shock, he found that he was able to even perceive the veins of every single leaf in the painting. It's almost as if it's real. Zhang Xian was astonished. Even to him, the painting was extremely lifelike. That was truly fearsome. If one were to hang it on a wall, those who passed by it would never think that it was a painting. Instead, they would view it as a real window. Zhang Xian examined the painting from the top to the bottom, and a deep frown surfaced on his forehead. But, it doesn't seem like there's any seal on this painting. The copper-masked figure had said earlier that there was a seal on the painting, but even with the eye of insight was activated, he was still unable to see what was amiss about the painting. It seems like my cultivation is still too low. I am still able to see through paintings of the 7th level with my current skills, but paintings of the 8th level are still a little beyond me. Zhang Xian shook his head. Even though his eye of insight had been upgraded after undergoing the 4th acknowledgement of the celestial master teacher, it was a pity that his cultivation was still simply too low, being at only St. Tu Dan. A painting of the 8th level was produced with the might of a leaving aperture realm expert. As such, even with the eye of insight, it was not surprising that Zhang Xian could not see through anything at all. Is there a seal on the painting? Such a lifelike painting, it is apparent that it is infused with the essence of evocative vividness. If there's truly a seal on it, what could it possibly be sealing? I have no idea either. However, since the other party was willing to bring out such a valuable painting to have it appraised in public, he must have noticed something peculiar about it. Zhang Xian was not able to notice what was wrong with the painting, and the others in the room also had confused frowns on their foreheads. With hushed voices, they discussed the matter among themselves, unable to figure out what was wrong. At this moment, the perplexed guild leader Mu stood up and asked, "May I take a closer look?" "Feel free," the copper-masked figure said nonchalantly. "Thank you." Guild leader Mu walked up to the painting before whipping out a magnifying crystal ball. After which, he began examining the painting bit by bit carefully. As he was the most capable appraiser in the room, the others waited with bated breaths for his conclusion, fearing that they would interrupt his work. A moment later, Guild leader Mu turned a doubtful gaze toward the copper-masked figure and asked, "Friend, can you tell us where exactly the seal is located or what form it takes? This way, we can be spared from making blind guesses here and there and focus our attention on deciphering it instead." Upon hearing those words, the copper-masked figure replied with a hint of disappointment in his voice, "Guild leader Mu isn't able to tell? If the other party could not even discern the seal, how could he possibly be able to decipher it? Allow me to take a look." The head of the Painter Guild also stood up and walked toward the painting in order to assess it more closely. The method by which a painter examined a painting was very different from that of an appraiser. Instead of taking out a crystal ball to scan the details of the painting, the head of the Painter Guild took out a brush instead and began drawing in midair. Noting the look of confusion in Zhang Xian's eyes, Wu Shi explained telepathically, "He's trying to comprehend the intentions of the painter through retracing his painting process." "I see." Zhang Xian nodded. In a sense, this was similar to backtracking. By backtracking on the painting process, one would be able to better analyze the focus of the painter when they was working on it, and through so, one could deduce their intentions and discern the location of the seal, assuming that it existed in the first place. As the head of the Painter Guild analyzed the painting process, the frown on his forehead seemed to gradually tighten. A while later, he turned around to explain his findings. The painting flows fluidly, and there is not a single inconsistency to be found in the painting. To put it simply, the painting was completed in a single seating and is wholesome. A seal on a painting would have introduced some incongruous factors to it, affecting its overall impression, but that isn't the case with this painting over here. Hearing the evaluation of the head of the Painter Guild, the copper-masked figure flung his hands furiously and harumphed in displeasure. "If there was no seal on the painting, do you think that I would go through so much effort to invite all of you here? Do you think that I am doing this just because I have too much time on my hands?" He had thought that with all of the top figures of Qingyuan City gathered together, they should be able to discern the anomaly in the painting in a single look. However, from the looks of it, it seemed like he had overestimated their capabilities. It seemed like an 8th-level painting had truly exceeded the caliber of the Qingyuan Empire. "Allow me." Wu Shi stood up and walked over. Not too long later, he shook his head and returned to his seat. With his eye of discernment, he could tell that there was something extraordinary with the painting, but he could not discern where the supposed seal was at all. Very soon, everyone within the room had already taken a look at the painting, but they shook their heads helplessly. Seeing that the crowd was gradually becoming impatient, Guild leader Mu waved his hand and said, "All right, friend, we won't get anywhere at this rate. We might be unable to tell where the seal is, but with the wisdom of the masses, we should still be able to offer some useful input on the matter and possibly unravel the seal that you speak of. You should just tell us where the seal is." From the looks of it, it seemed like the seal was very exquisitely hidden, and it would require careful examination over long periods of time in order to discern where it was. Instead of wasting their time on this, it would be more efficient for the other party to just reveal where it was so that they could begin working on deciphering the seal. All right then. Seeing that no one was able to discern where the seal was located, the hint of disappointment in the eyes of the copper-masked figure deepened. Perhaps it was because he had no better solution than this. He sighed deeply and nodded before pointing to the clouds at the bottom of the mountain. The seal is hidden amid the clouds. If I'm not mistaken, there's a painting that lies beneath the clouds, and there is some kind of secret concealed within it. However, I am unable to figure out how the clouds can be removed from the painting, the copper-masked figure said. The clouds? The crowd swiftly turned their gazes back to the painting. The painting depicted a mountain range with towering peaks that shot beyond the clouds. The middle portion of the mountains were mostly concealed amid bundles of drifting, wispy clouds. They had thought that it was just a detail of the painting, but it was actually the seal. Intrigued, Zhang Xian also examined the clouds with his eye of insight, but he was unable to discern anything peculiar about them. After examining the painting for a moment, the head of the Painter Guild couldn't help but ask, "How can you be certain that the clouds are the seal?" The crowd also swiftly turned their gazes over. Shaking his head, the copper-masked figure instructed, "Bring me a torch." An appraiser standing by the entrance of the hall backed out of the room, and a moment later, he returned with a torch. The copper-masked figure took the torch and lightly placed it against the painting. Under the searing flames of the torch, the mountain range was dyed in an orange glow, and the lush greenery was swiftly reduced to ashes. Only the clouds remained as they were. This. The head of the Painter Guild narrowed his eyes in astonishment. For only the clouds to remain unaffected by the flames of the torch, that means that the clouds were not part of the original painting. Judging from the effect, I deduce that there was an interval of at least 30 years between the completion of the painting and the addition of the clouds. How could I have failed to notice it? Under normal circumstances, if the painting was truly wholesome, any change to the painting should have affected its entirety. Yet, for only the clouds to remain unaffected by the flames of the torch, it meant that the clouds had been added a significant period after the completion of the rest of the painting. If that was the case, it was understandable why the copper-masked figure would view it to be a seal. The brush strokes for the painting of the clouds must have been slightly more forceful in order to allow it to blend in better with the rest of the painting, thus making it harder to notice one. However, considering how wholesome the painting remained even after the addition of the clouds, it stands to reason that they were added in by the original painter himself, Guild leader Mu interjected. The crowd nodded. Only the original painter could possibly add clouds into the painting without introducing any incongruous factors into the painting. But, even if we know that the clouds are the seal, there is no way we can remove them. The crowd fell silent once more. Even if they knew that the clouds were added after the completion of the painting and that they were likely a seal, they had no way of separating the two. After all, the clouds had already fused with the rest of the painting. Seeing that the crowd was still helpless after he revealed the position of the seal, the copper-masked figure shook his head. It seems like I have overestimated the Qingyuan Empire. Sighing, he was just about to put away the painting when someone suddenly spoke up. Can you allow me to take a look at it? The copper-masked figure raised his gaze and saw a young man walking toward him. The young man was none other than Zhang Xian. He was also a little intrigued by the painting, and since the others were unable to discern anything peculiar about it, he wanted to take a closer look to see what was going on. However, before Zhang Xian could reach the painting, another voice sounded behind him. You are only a 5-star appraiser, what can you possibly see from the painting? Allow me to do it instead. After which, Zhang Jiuxiao stood up and walked proudly toward the painting. He brushed his finger lightly across the painting and pondered for a moment before saying, I have seen such 8th-level painting before, and I also know how the seal works. Seeing how confident Zhang Jiuxiao was, the copper-masked figure clasped his fist and earnestly requested, You know how the seal works. If that's truly the case, I humbly request you to remove the seal on the painting. I'm willing to reward you generously for this favor. This seal is known as the sealing cloud pin. It utilizes a unique method to conceal the layer beneath it without harming the foundation of the painting. If I'm not mistaken, the seal has been imbued with an individual spirit, or else the clouds would have surely fused together with the rest of the painting with sufficient time. Zhang Jiuxiao analyzed confidently. Sealing cloud pin. The copper-masked figure and the crowd turned to look at Zhang Jiuxiao in bewilderment. They had never heard of such a skill before. Zhang Jiuxiao placed his hands behind his back and spoke proudly. I once witnessed a person undoing this seal back in my clan, so I know how it can be deciphered. Your clan? You don't know. The number one genius of Qingyuan City is actually an offspring of a sage clan, the Zhang clan. An offspring of the Zhang clan? That explains a lot. With a background like his, even if he's just from the side family, he's bound to have seen things that we can hardly imagine ourselves. Hearing that Zhang Jiuxiao had a way to decipher the painting, an excited commotion broke out amid the crowd, and many looks of admiration were centered on him. Upon hearing that the other party was from the Zhang clan, the copper-masked figure froze for a brief moment before clasping his fists to ask, "So, how should the sealing cloud pin that you spoke of be deciphered?" Simple. In order to resolve the seal, we have to find an individual who specializes in soul arts. Using his soul as a medium, we will draw out the spirit harnessed within the clouds. An individual who specializes in soul arts? The copper-masked figure asked doubtfully. Indeed. Once the spirit harnessed within the seal is drawn out, we'll be able to remove the seal easily, Zhang Jiuxiao said. The copper-masked figure hesitated for a brief moment before asking, "May I know how skilled the individual must be in soul arts?" That individual must have fine control over their soul, and their soul must not be too strong. Otherwise, that might cause severe damage to the painting, turning the 8th level painting into a piece of scrap paper. More importantly, that individual must know where the spirit is concealed, so he must have a deep understanding of painting. The copper-masked figure was stunned. Where in the world can we find a person like that? It was easy to find individuals to satisfy a single one of the conditions, but to find one that satisfied all 3 conditions. Was there even such a person in Qingyuan City? Zhang Jiuxiao chuckled. There's no need to look any further. Standing upright, he emanated a lofty but valiant air, reminiscent of a true hero. I happen to fit the criteria. Chapter 1166, Durians, you? The eyes of the copper-masked figure lit up, and he unwittingly clenched his fists tightly by his side. The crowd was also astonished to hear those words. That's right. Zhang Jiuxiao said confidently as he tilted his head upward. At this moment, he felt as if he had really soared into the 9 heavens. He couldn't even begin to describe how deeply indignant he felt when he saw that Zhang Xian was granted a seat when he, the number one genius of Qingyuan Empire, had to remain standing before others. Now that he finally had a chance to stand up and shine, he could hardly hold back his excitement. Zhang Shi, I beseech you to help me remove the seal from the painting, the copper-masked figure clasped his fist and said. At this moment, he had put down the haughty attitude that he had maintained even before Wu Shi and the others. Rest assured. Zhang Jiuxiao said confidently as he made his way over to the painting. He whipped his brush before pausing for a brief moment. After which, he suddenly turned his head around and said, Zhang Shi, I might have to trouble you to help me grind some ink for me. Zhang Xian turned to glance at his sides to see whom Zhang Jiuxiao was talking to, but the latter's intent gaze on him seemed to suggest that he was the chosen one. Taken aback, he asked in bewilderment, You're talking to me? Indeed. I will have to focus my attention on resolving the seal, so I earnestly require your help for this matter. You wouldn't turn down my request, right? Zhang Jiuxiao said with a faint smirk on his lips. Back at the heart-tempering bridge, the other party had outdone him so utterly that he couldn't even keep his head up in public anymore. Not to mention, just a moment ago, he was forced into calling the other party senior uncle. This was a rare chance for him to strike back, so naturally, he was going to make full use of it. He was going to show the other party that a genius like him wouldn't be outmatched by just anyone. Very well then. Zhang Xian could easily see through Zhang Jiuxiao's intentions, but he still chose to agree to the matter with a nonchalant shrug. In the first place, it wasn't any big deal to be grinding some ink for the other party. Besides, he was interested in the 8-star painting as well, and he was curious to see if Zhang Jiuxiao would really be able to break the seal or not. Thus, he walked up to Zhang Jiuxiao, whipped out an inkstone from his storage ring, and began grinding some ink carefully. Seeing the young man before him working obediently without daring to utter a single word of complaint, Zhang Jiuxiao felt indescribable exhilaration rushing through his veins. Taking a momentary breather to calm himself down, he dabbed his brush into the ink before tapping it lightly on the painting. Wang! Contrary to expectations, the ink on the brush didn't blot the painting. Instead, it floated in midair, covering the white clouds in the painting. Suspended imagery. Under Zhang Jiuxiao's skillful movements, it took only a few instants for another layer of clouds identical to those on the painting to appear above it. After that was done, he scrutinized the clouds carefully, probably attempting to identify the location of the spirit infused amongst the clouds. Then, with a casual wave of his hand, he retracted the ink back into the inkstone before focusing his soul energy into the painting. His soul energy is exceptionally pure. He must have cultivated some kind of secret art relating to the soul. Zhang Xian noted. While the other party's soul was nothing compared to him, it still stood out among other cultivators. Based on Zhang Xian's analysis, it was likely due to the cultivation of some sort of secret art from the Zhang clan. For a clan with as powerful as the Zhang clan, even its side family was not something that ordinary clans could hope to match. Be it the things that one could see there, or the secret arts that they had in their possession, they were truly nothing short of extraordinary. With such thoughts in mind, Zhang Xian discreetly stretched his hand towards the painting and touched it lightly. Wang! A book immediately materialized in the Library of Heaven's Path. Zhang Xian was just about to take a look at it when he suddenly noticed Zhang Jiuxiao's face turning ghastly pale, and cold sweat was pouring down his face. What's wrong? Zhang Xian asked with a frown. At this point, the crowd also seemed to have noticed that something had gone wrong. They could sense that Zhang Jiuxiao's current state wasn't simply due to exhaustion. Pang! Before the crowd could even ask about the matter, a tinge of red abruptly appeared on Zhang Jiuxiao's pale face, and in the next moment, he suddenly staggered back 8 steps before spewing a mouthful of blood. Worried, Guild leader Mu immediately rushed up to him. I'm fine. I just didn't expect the spirit in the painting to retaliate so violently. Zhang Jiuxiao shook his head, but halfway through his words, he suddenly realized that the room was bizarrely quiet. He raised his head and saw Guild leader Mu staring at him with a look of horror. Perplexed, he asked, "Teacher, what's wrong?" Even if he had failed in undoing the seal, surely the other party didn't have to look at him with such an expression, right? Why your head, there are durians growing out of your head. Guild leader Mu exclaimed in shock. Durians? Zhang Jiuxiao was taken aback by those abrupt words. There is a tail on your bottom as well. Another elder amidst the crowd exclaimed. Ah! Zhang Jiuxiao quickly turned around to look at his bottom, and the sight he saw left his eyes narrowing into slits, and he nearly blacked out on the spot. There was a crimson tail extending from his bottom, and it was extremely furry, reminiscent of green foxtail. At the same time, through his spiritual perception, he also noticed the large spiky lumps that bore a striking resemblance to durians were emerging from his head one after another, and it didn't take long for them to fill his entire head. To make things worse, they were showing signs of flowering. What's going on? Zhang Jiuxiao's face paled in disbelief as he subconsciously took several steps back. At this point, he was already on the verge of insanity. All he had done was to attempt to break the seal on the painting, so why would such an issue suddenly happen to him? From the looks of it, it seems like a plant spirit has taken root within your primordial spirit. Fortunately, it seems to be an ordinary plant spirit, or else the growth of the plants would be much faster than this. Seeing through the root of the problem, guild leader Ruan spoke up and explained. As a 7-star pinnacle spirit awakener, she had heard of such a situation before. However, it was still rather shocking to see it in person. Plant spirit? What's going on? Zhang Jiuxiao asked anxiously. The situation was really driving him insane. All he had wanted to do was to resolve the seal and bring some dignity back to himself, and yet, before he could achieve anything, such a thing ended up happening to him instead. Durians were actually growing out of his head, and there were already 4 of them now. It is probably the retaliation of the spirit in the painting. You tried to get rid of it, so it got even with you. Zhang Xian shook his head in sympathy. He had seen this situation of Hall Master Xing before as well. He had tried to mend the rift in the other party's primordial spirit through spirit enchanting it, but he failed to destroy the spirit in time. As a result, he ended up bearing fruits on his head and blooming flowers on his bottom. For such a situation to occur with Zhang Jiuxiao at this moment, there was no doubt that it had something to do with the spirit within the painting. Most likely, the latter had attempted to get rid of the spirit, only to get done in himself instead. What do I do? Zhang Jiuxiao's face paled in despair. He was the #1 genius of Qingyuan Empire, the idol of countless young women. How could he possibly walk around with durians on his head? He would become the laughingstock of the town. It's very simple, you just have to get rid of the spirit that has taken root within you. Zhang Xian explained in composure. He had panicked a little when he saw it happen to Hall Master Xing the previous time around, but the past experience had truly tempered his mind well. At this point, he no longer felt anything towards the matter anymore. Get rid of the spirit? How can I get rid of it? Zhang Jiuxiao looked at Zhang Xian anxiously, as if a desperate man clutching onto his final straw of hope. Simple. Bear open your soul to me, and I'll help you check for the spirit and destroy it. Zhang Xian said. Even someone as powerful as Hall Master Xing was unable to deal with the plant spirit by himself, let alone Zhang Jiuxiao. This was already the most effective and easiest way to get rid of the spirit. You want me to bear open my soul to you? That won't do. Zhang Jiuxiao swiftly shook his head. As an offspring of the Zhang clan, he had many secrets concealed within him, especially within his soul. Given such, how could he possibly bear his soul to a random stranger? One must know that bearing one's soul was effectively no different from standing completely nude before another. There was no way he could do that. That won't do. I guess that can't be helped then. Let me take a look at what the spirit within the painting is first, and I'll see if I can concoct some kind of medicine that could isolate and kill the spirit within you. Zhang Xian said. It was a little more troublesome, but as long as he could figure out what kind of spirit it was, he was confident that he would be able to concoct a corresponding poison to deal with it. Back then, he had raised it as one of the potential solutions to Hall Master Xing as well, but it was a pity that the latter didn't agree to it. All right. You should go on and take a look at the painting then. Zhang Jiuxiao heaved a sigh of relief upon hearing that he didn't have to bare his soul before urging the other party forward. Zhang Xian nodded nonchalantly before turning his gaze towards the painting. His eyes were fixated on the painting, but his mind had already slipped into the Library of Heaven's Path to take a look at the newly compiled book. After taking a quick look, a frown emerged on his forehead. Did you notice anything? Noticing Zhang Xian's expression, Wu Shi asked in intrigue. Instead of answering Wu Shi's question, Zhang Xian turned his gaze towards the copper-masked figure and asked, "Where did you obtain this painting from?" "I have only invited all of you over to decipher the seal for me. I don't think that I'm obliged to tell you the background of the painting," the copper-masked figure replied curtly. "You're right, you are indeed not obliged to tell me the background of the painting." Zhang Xian placed his hands behind his back and replied. The marshlands of the northern meadows is an extremely humid place. An 8-star painting it might be, but having spent 2,000 years in a place like that, it is already permeated with an air of dampness. It's not apparent from a distance away, but it's quite easily discernible at close proximity. Even with his face concealed, the shock of the copper-masked figure was palpable. To be able to deduce the history of the painting just through the slightly damp aura around the painting, wasn't the other party's eye of discernment a little too formidable? Before the copper-masked figure could recover from his state, Zhang Xian had already continued, "The marshlands of the northern meadows is a treacherous land, but many cultivators still flock there in hopes of stumbling upon treasure. It's not too surprising that you were able to find the work of the sorrowless old man there. There's one thing that I have to concede that you are right about. It's indeed suspicious that the sorrowless old man would suddenly conceal what he has drawn within the mountains 30 years after he has created the work. Judging from that in itself, it must have been quite a huge secret." The eyelids of the copper-masked figure twitched slightly as he narrowed his eyes. "It doesn't seem like we are getting anywhere at this rate. If none of you are able to decipher the seal, I'll be taking my painting away with me then." "Who says that none of us are able to decipher the seal?" Zhang Xian spoke up. "Since you don't want me to speak about the origin of the painting, I can't be bothered to waste my breath on it either. I'll talk about the painting itself then. The canvas for the painting is specially created by fusing the skin of the emerald horn fish and white reindeer together, and the ink used is a compound between the sapphire stone and golden source water. It's due to the usage of these precious materials that there isn't the slightest wear and tear on it despite spending 2,000 years under damp condition. On the contrary, the artwork is getting more and more lifelike and touching as the years go by. Judging from the changes in the ink color, it seems like it has been 3 years since you unearthed the painting from the ground, and it should have been 2,142 years since the painting is created. Judging by the timing, I stand to believe that it's the work of the sorrowless old man back when he's around 270 years old. When he eventually added the clouds on the painting, he was already close to 300. In other words, the addition of the clouds could very well be the last thing he did before he went missing. As for whether he was killed or kidnapped, there is no way to say for sure now." Everyone was astonished by the analysis. By the side, guild leader Mu couldn't help but widen his eyes in shock. Even he was unable to determine the history of the painting despite examining it for a long time earlier, and yet, the young man was actually able to detail the history of the painting with just a short glance. Wasn't his appraising capability a little too fearsome? On the other hand, the durian head Zhang Jiuxiao's body also staggered upon hearing those words. At this point, he really felt like bursting into tears. Didn't the other party say that he was a 5-star appraiser? On normal days, he wouldn't even spare a second glance to other 5-star appraisers, and yet, why did it feel that the other party was even more formidable than a 7-star appraiser like him? The sorrowless old man had already reached leaving Aperture Realm prior to his disappearance. With his outstanding painting skills, his painting was still able to reach the level of evoking vividness even with the addition of those clouds, making it exceptionally difficult to decipher the seal he has put up. Chapter 1167, The ink slab won't grind itself. Assuming that you are right, what does determining the material of the canvas and the age of the painting have to do with deciphering the seal? The copper-masked figure interjected Zhang Xian. There's indeed no direct relation between them, but such analysis allows us to deduce the reason why sorrowless old man has decided to leave behind a seal on the painting, as well as to determine possible flaws and deficiencies in the seal. Zhang Xian replied with a smile. To claim that you are able to determine the flaws and deficiencies within a painting through just the age of the painting itself, aren't you being a little too conceited over there? Zhang Jiuxiao tilted his head upward and harumphed. Due to him speaking too forcefully, the durians on his head shook violently, seemingly ready to fall to the ground at any moment. Even though the crowd had remained silent, the looks on their faces showed that they agreed with Zhang Jiuxiao's point of view. Being able to accurately determine the age of painting did prove that one was an outstanding appraiser, but that piece of knowledge had nothing to do with the seal at all. Don't impose your ignorance upon others. Zhang Xian replied nonchalantly. He took a sweeping glance across the room before eventually halting his gaze upon a certain figure. If I'm not mistaken, you are the head of the Painter Guild, right? Indeed. My name is Meng Chong. Guild leader Meng stood up and clasped his fist politely. Guild leader Meng, pardon for troubling you, but may I ask what kind of painting style was in trend in the Qingyuan Empire Painter Guild 2000 years ago? What kind of brush stroke was preferred then? Zhang Xian asked. This. Guild leader Meng contemplated for a moment before replying. 2000 years ago, the painting style that was popular within Qingyuan Empire was the anchored painting style. This style consists of determining the specific size and outline of the objects within the painting before slowly painting them over a layer after a layer. Usually, one would first spread a layer of ink over the entire paper before slowly painting it on a layer after a layer. Every single layer must be done with utmost preciseness, and the margin of allowed errors is minimal. It is an extremely intensive process, but it allows for the creation of extremely vivid and wholesome paintings. Just like anything else, painting styles would also gradually change over the years. Each era had their unique mark which differed greatly from the other. It was based on such differences that allowed appraisers to be able to identify the era which a certain artifact was produced. The anchored painting style was in trend 2000 years ago, and many painters had chosen to adopt that style in their painting. Of them, the most notable figure was definitely the sorrowless old man. It was for this reason that everyone immediately guessed that it was the work of the sorrowless old man when they first saw the painting. Indeed, it's the anchored painting style. Zhang Xian nodded. While the anchored painting style allows for extremely vivid and wholesome paintings, there is a huge downside to it as well. The ink used in the painting must be equal throughout so that the painting remains flat as the sides of a knife. Otherwise, the painter would be mocked for his lack of skill. At this point, Zhang Xian gestured to the painting. However, this painting is of the equal thickness throughout, be it the sky, greenery, mountains, or clouds. Everyone swiftly extended their spiritual perception towards the painting in order to perceive it with greater clarity, and a moment later, they nodded in agreement. That was indeed the case. If the other party hadn't spoken about it, they might not have noticed this anomaly. So what if the painting is of equal thickness? The copper-masked figure harumphed impatiently. What I need is for the seal to be deciphered, not an analysis of the painting. Calm down and listen to my words first. They contain the crux to deciphering the seal in the painting. Zhang Xian turned to the copper-masked figure to appease him before continuing on. Like what I have said earlier, the sorrowless old man had worked on the painting on 2 separate occasions, and there was an interval of 30 years for those 2 occasions. In other words, the painting was already complete the first time that he had worked on it. Based on the standards of the anchored painting style, the painting must have already been flat then 30 years later. In order to conceal some kind of secret, the sorrowless old man intentionally added white clouds onto the mountains. Since he was painting over his work then, there should have been a difference in the thickness of the painting between the clouds and the remaining portions. Hearing those words, the crowd turned their attention back to the clouds once more, and a moment ago, bewilderment seeped into their eyes. The painting is of equal thickness throughout even for the portions with the clouds. How could this be? Such voices could be heard throughout the hall. As spoken by the voices in the hall, the clouds were of equal thickness with the rest of the painting. Just looking at the painting by itself, there was nothing that suggested the painting had been worked on twice. I believe everyone should be able to tell that the painting is of equal thickness throughout. What this means is that he had shaved off a layer of the painting prior to adding on the clouds. Zhang Xian nodded. This. The crowd widened their eyes in disbelief. To shave off the original work and add something different to it? Is this even feasible in practice? The head of the Painter Guild, Meng Chong, expressed his skepticism towards the matter. As a 7-star pinnacle painter, he fully understood the difficulty in pulling such a thing off in practice. Since the sorrowless old man was working with ink, as most painters did, the matter wasn't as simple as simply painting over the previous layer. Ink that had seeped into the canvas from painting the previous layers would affect the new layer that had been painted over, causing unpredictable distortions in the painting over time. Yet, the painting before him showed no distortions of that sort theoretically. By careful calculation and fine control of one's brush stroke, it might be possible to pull something as complicated as that off, but anyone with the slightest understanding of painting would understand that it was nigh impossible to carry out in practice. You're right, but what if you were to use suspended imagery on the painting instead? Zhang Xian asked. Suspended imagery? But that would make it a separate entity from the painting. Guild leader Meng Chong replied. Suspended imagery referred to the capability of painting in midair. However, if the clouds were to be painted using suspended imagery, it wouldn't fuse in with the rest of the painting. In other words, if one were to just move the canvas, the two would separate from one another. However, it was clear from the painting itself that the clouds had fused in with the rest of the painting. That would indeed be an issue, but just like what Zhang Jiuxiao had said, a spirit had been infused into the painting. If I were to just make an analogy, if the previous painting and the clouds are two different sheets of paper, the spirit would be the binding factor between them, allowing them to fuse without interfering with one another. Zhang Xian nodded. I see. The crowd came to a realization. They were still a little confused previously when Zhang Jiuxiao said that there was a spirit within the painting, but after listening to the explanation, they finally understood what was going on. But after all you have said, haven't you come to the same conclusion as me? Zhang Jiuxiao harumphed. He was still wondering what kind of astounding theories the fellow would come up with, but after going one big round, the other party still ended up stumbling on the same conclusion as him. That isn't really the case. Zhang Xian said. You have accurately identified the presence of a spirit within the painting, but do you know the reason behind it and how it can be dispelled? Zhang Jiuxiao's face turned crimson upon hearing those words. The only reason why he knew that there was a spirit within the painting was because he had once witnessed an elder deciphering something similar back in his clan. As for the reason why a spirit was infused into the painting and how one could resolve the issue, he was honestly not too sure. If he had truly understood the issue, he wouldn't have ended up sprouting durians on his head either. Since there is a spirit binding the two, it is nigh impossible to separate them. If one were to do it forcefully, it might even result in the destruction of both paintings. To make an analogy, that is equivalent to attempting to tear apart two pieces of paper which have been bound together with glue for several thousand years. Even one were to succeed in pulling them apart, would the remains of the painting still be discernible? Turning his attention away from the conceited Zhang Jiuxiao, Zhang Xian continued his analysis. Hearing those words, the face of the copper-masked figure twitched slightly before falling silent. His purpose of undoing the seal was to find out what was hidden beneath the clouds. As such, it would be pointless to him if the layer beneath were to be destroyed as well in the midst of separating the painting from the clouds. After a moment of silence, the copper-masked figure turned to Zhang Xian and asked, Zhang Shi, is there a way to separate the clouds while ensuring that the painting remains intact? Since the young man was able to make sense out of the situation, perhaps he might just be able to accomplish what others had failed at. Since I walked up here and said so much, naturally, I am confident in resolving the issue. Zhang Xian replied with a smile. Oh. I beseech you to enlighten me. The eyes of the copper-masked figure lit up upon hearing Zhang Xian's words, and he quickly clasped his fist earnestly. It's actually rather simple. Zhang Xian nodded. If the sorrowless old man had used any other binding factor in order to fix the clouds to the painting, it would have been truly difficult to separate the two. However, since he had chosen to use a spirit instead, it actually plays to our advantage. The spirit infused into the painting is similar to a plant spirit, it would only develop or act in very specific manners. In this case, it would be to bind the two parts of the painting together. In essence, it wouldn't be wrong to say that the spirit possesses no sentience. I believe that Guild Leader Ruan should be aware of it as well. Guild Leader Ruan nodded. Most plants possessed spirit, which controlled their intake of nutrients to facilitate their growth. However, unlike the animal spirits, they didn't have a sense of self, which disallowed them from roaming around freely and averting disasters on their own accord. It was due to the lack of sentience that the spirit was able to sustain the monotonous work of binding the two paintings together for 2,000 years. Thus, if I were to grant the spirit sentience, do you think that it'll still be able to carry out its job as well? Zhang Xian said with a smile. If the spirit is granted sentience, it'll view the clouds above the painting as a tumor plaguing the painting, rendering it extremely uncomfortable. It would surely struggle to get rid of the clouds above it. That seems to be the case, but granting sentience to the spirit wouldn't be an easy task, would it? It doesn't seem like it would be easy to pull that off. With a direction pointed out for them, the eyes of the crowd lit up. However, at the same time, they had also come to a bottleneck as well. Enchanting spirit into a weapon was easy, but granting sentience into a spirit which had laid dormant for more than 2,000 years was clearly something not as simple. It's indeed something not too easy to carry out in practice, but I happen to be able to do it. Zhang Xian smiled. Zhang Shi, I implore you to help me. If you are able to do so, I'll surely reward you handsomely for this. The copper-masked figure bowed deeply to Zhang Xian. Previously, he had thought that the crowd of Qingyuan Empire was inept, being unable to even discern the presence of the seal of the painting. However, after hearing Zhang Xian's analysis, he couldn't help but find himself in awe of the other party. To be able to find the root of the problem within such a short period of time and deduce a feasible solution to it, his wisdom and eye of discernment were indeed extraordinary. Rest assured, I'll help you on this matter. However, I still need to make some preparations beforehand in order to ensure that the painting wouldn't be damaged in the process. Zhang Xian said. Of course, of course. The copper-masked figure nodded. May I know what Zhang Shi requires? If there's anything that requires my help, I'll try my best to satisfy your needs. Speaking was always easier than doing. If it was so easy to decipher the seal, he wouldn't have been helpless before the painting despite having obtained it for so many years. I don't need anything for the time being. Zhang Xian replied with a shake of his head. He paused for a brief moment before flicking his wrist and taking out a brush. After which, he explained, it would be difficult to enchant the painting as it is. In order to do so, I would have to either destroy the conception of the painting or carve an opening in it so as that I can extend my consciousness into it. However, doing so would inevitably cause some damage to the painting, so I would like to seek your pardon regarding this issue. Don't worry, feel free to do anything that you deem necessary. What he truly valued was the secret hidden beneath the seal. In his view, no matter how valuable the painting was, it couldn't be more important than what lay beneath. That would be great. Heaving a sigh of relief. Zhang Xian was just about to dab the brush in his hand into some ink when he suddenly halted for a brief moment. Then, he turned around to look at Zhang Jiuxiao and bellowed. What are you waiting for? The ink slab won't grind itself. Chapter 1168, Kangshi Silhouette, U. Hearing that bellow, Zhang Jiuxiao's body staggered, and he nearly vomited blood. It was just a moment ago that he had asked the other party to grind some ink for him, and in the blink of an eye, the favor had been returned to him. This face slap had come way too quickly. Overwhelmed with agitation, a durian from his head plopped to the ground. Zhang Jiuxiao was just about to give Zhang Xian a tongue lashing when the other party's voice sounded once more. I will have to focus my attention on resolving the seal, so I require your help with this. For something as important as this, surely you won't turn down my request, right? Zhang Jiuxiao's face immediately turned black. All the words that he had intended to say choked up in his chest, rendering him completely speechless. It seemed like, those were the words he had said to the other party before. He had just stood majestically before the crowd, as if a hero paving the way forward, but now, with their identities switched all of a sudden, he suddenly felt a stinging pain on his face. Karma really comes around. As frustrated as Zhang Jiuxiao was, he knew that the other party was getting back at him for what he had done earlier. Even though he was extremely furious, he still obediently stepped forward and began grinding some ink. Seeing that, Zhang Xian nodded in satisfaction. To be honest, he was not one to bear grudges. That was because he never had to remember one. He could sense the other party's hostility toward him, and since that was the case, there was no need for him to act like a good man any longer. Not to mention, a person from the Zhang clan was planning to take Luo Ruoxin as his bride. One must know that even Feng Sun had nearly died from his hands just by confessing to Luo Ruoxin. While he had no idea where the Zhang clan was and did not yet have the strength to get them for that matter, that did not stop him from obtaining a small down payment first. After Zhang Jiuxiao was done grinding the ink, Zhang Xian was just about to begin painting to destroy the conception of the painting so that he could extend his consciousness in when a thought suddenly came to him. He turned to Guild Leader Meng Chong and asked, "Guild Leader Meng, do you have any 7-star painting books on you? I need as many of them as possible. I intend to quickly browse through them in order to analyze where I should enchant the spirit to minimize the damage to the painting." "You want to browse through painting books right now?" Not expecting the young man to request books from him at this crucial moment, Guild Leader Meng was taken aback for a moment before shaking his head. "I don't have many books on me at the moment. However, if you really need them, the Painter Guild just happens to be located in the vicinity. I can fetch some for you right now. I'll be troubling you then." Zhang Xian clasped his fist and bowed. "There's no need to stand on ceremony," Guild Leader Meng Chong replied before walking out of the room. Not too long later, he returned to the hall, and with a flick of his wrist, a huge pile of books appeared before him. All in all, there seemed to be several dozen thousand of them. As the head of the Painter Guild, he had the right to take the books in the Painter Guild out at his whim. He had not been too sure which books Zhang Xian required, so to be safe, he had taken most of the books and brought them over. Zhang Xian walked up to the pile of books and swiftly swept over them with his gaze. After which, he picked up one of them and casually flipped through it as he delved his consciousness into the Library of Heaven's Path. 7-star Heaven's Path Paint Art. Zhang Xian smiled in satisfaction before flipping through the book in his hand. It was based on the astounding prowess of the 6-star Heaven's Path paint art that Zhang Xian was able to pull off suspended imagery. In truth, he had never gathered the required books to learn the 7-star Heaven's Path paint art before. A short hour later, he had managed to fully comprehend the essence of the 7-star Heaven's Path paint art. Exhaling deeply, Zhang Xian finally placed down the book in his hands. At this moment, his comprehension of painting had already reached the level of 7-star pinnacle, which was comparable to most 8-star primary painters. "Zhang Shi, can we start now?" the copper-masked figure asked anxiously. The young man before him had picked up an unimpressive-looking book among the huge pile and dazed off for a whole hour. This period of time had felt like an eternity to him, and it was more than enough to turn his anticipation into anxiety. "I'm done." Nodding confidently, Zhang Xian took in a deep breath before making his way toward the painting. Activating his eye of insight once more, he took another good look at the painting before him. If the painting had been a complete enigma to him a moment ago, with the flaws he had seen in the Library of Heaven's Path and his enhanced understanding of painting at the moment, he was already able to see roughly what was going on with the painting, and many aspects that had bewildered him previously had become clear. "I'm going to start now." Without wasting any words, Zhang Xian dabbed his brush lightly into the inkstone, soaking it with ink. After which, he positioned his brush carefully before moving it majestically. Hoo. In the blink of an eye, a painting appeared right before everyone's eyes, floating peacefully in midair. "What profound suspended imagery this is," Guild Leader Meng remarked with a mix of astonishment and awe. The unskilled revel in the commotion while the experts assess the mastery. One Zhang Jiuxiao had pulled off suspended imagery previously as well, but he had only brought out the bare basics of its capability. On the other hand, the young man before him had managed to infuse a beautiful conception on top of the suspended imagery, a clear indication that he had achieved incredible mastery in the way of painting. Profound? Guild leader Mu was surprised to hear that guild leader Meng had such a high opinion of Zhang Xian. He could not help but ask in curiosity, "How does he compare to you then?" "To tell you the truth, even I wouldn't be a match for him." Every single stroke of his suspended imagery further enhances the artistic conception that he's trying to build, allowing him to create a painting so vivid that it feels as if it will leap out at any moment. He has already accomplished a level of mastery very close to that of an 8-star painter. Guild leader Meng said with a look of helplessness. As reluctant as he was to admit it, the fact was that the other party's proficiency in painting was far higher than his. It was no wonder he was able to see through the crux of the painting in a single look. In the Qingyuan Empire, there was probably no one who could compete with him. Upon seeing this sight, Zhang Jiuxiao's eyelids began twitching alongside his lips. He felt as if the world had collapsed on him, and he was very close to suffering from a mental breakdown. He could not help but recall how he had said that he would offer Zhang Xian some pointers earlier. At this point, it could not have been any clearer that the other party had already achieved a level far beyond him in both appraising and painting. To say such big words before a true expert. If it was possible for anyone to die of embarrassment, he was probably going to join the list of victims very soon. Hoo. Before everyone's astonished gazes, Zhang Xian finally placed his brush down. A door stood right before his eyes. A door? Why did he draw a door? The view that we are receiving of the 8-star painting is actually similar to looking the scenery beyond a window. While the mountain range in the painting may seem to be in close proximity to us, it's actually another massive world within the painting itself. If one attempted to traverse through the painting with one's consciousness, it would take an eternity to arrive at one's destination. As such, it is imperative to first open up to a door leading to one's destination within the painting prior to extending one's consciousness in. With guild leader Meng's explanation, everyone's initial astonishment swiftly turned into nods of realization. The group that had gathered for the appraisal convention tonight consisted of the top figures of Qingyuan City. While most of them were not painters themselves, they still had a certain degree of understanding of the field. The painting left behind by the sorrowless old man had achieved the level of evoking vividness, and the striking verisimilitude of the painting had left everyone with the misconception that the mountain range in the painting was very close to them. In order to enchant the spirit infused within the painting, it was imperative for one to come into proximity with it first, so a passageway needed to be constructed beforehand. After putting his brush down, Zhang Xian placed his hand on the door that he had just painted and pushed it forcefully. Voila! The door swiftly imprinted itself onto the painting. Hong Long. In an instant, the mountain range seemed to suddenly magnify right before everyone's eyes, and the freshly painted door seemed to open a passageway into it. After doing this, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. He turned to Wu Shi and said, "Wu Shi, I'll be going in now. I'll have to trouble you to protect me." As unlikely as it was for anyone to assault him on this occasion, Zhang Xian still felt that it was better to be safe than sorry. "All right." Wu Shi stepped forward and took a position by Zhang Xian's side. Reassured, Zhang Xian finally took a seat on a ground before extending a sliver of his consciousness toward the door. Upon entering the door, he immediately felt a damp air gushing right at his face. Paying no heed to it, he swiftly traversed forward, and before long, he arrived at the midpoint of the mountain. White clouds covered the mountain peak, making it impossible to see anything beneath it. He extended his consciousness further into the clouds, and in an instant, his surroundings suddenly turned completely dark. He knew that this was a result of the lack of sentience of spirit infused within the painting. Thus, he began to enchant the space. He lit up 20 sparks consecutively before adeptly fusing them together. At this point, the space was nearly fully lit up, just a breath short from triggering the spirit's sentience. Even so, the light still illuminated the scenery beneath the clouds, and the entire mountain appeared before Zhang Xian's eyes clearly. It was a lush mountain forest, not much different from the other parts of the painting. However, at the very center of the mountain, beneath the bright rays of the sun, a vague figure could be seen. Despite his faint silhouette, he emanated an aura that commanded the veneration of others. This. Upon seeing the figure, Zhang Xian's eyes narrowed in astonishment. He had seen the figure before. Kong Shi. At this very moment, Kong Shi was standing quietly on the mountain, exuding a peaceful and harmonious air. But at the same time, his figure felt a little indistinct, as if his presence was just a mere illusion that would vanish at a touch. This is a sight that the sorrowless old man saw. Zhang Xian clenched his fists tightly in agitation. It went without saying that the Kong Shi amid the mountain forest was only part of the painting, but the sorrowless old man had accurately captured the distinct aura that Kong Shi commanded, and that was not something that one could simply conceptualize from mere thoughts. In other words, it was very likely that the sorrowless old man had seen this sight himself, and too striking a sight it was, he could not resist painting it. Wu Shi said that the sorrowless old man was an untalented individual in his earlier years. It was due to a sudden enlightenment in his 180s that his cultivation and mastery in painting abruptly soared. Is it possible that this was the result from seeing Kong Shi's silhouette? Wu Shi had once told him about the history of the sorrowless old man, and his history truly felt like something that had leaped right out from a fantasy novel. For such a massive change to occur to him all of a sudden, there was no doubt that he had stumbled upon a life-changing encounter. Perhaps, it might have been the sight of Kong Shi that had granted him sudden enlightenment, allowing him to advance his cultivation and understanding of painting swiftly. Out of gratitude, he had decided to dedicate this painting to Kong Shi. However, anything that is related to Kong Shi has great implications. He knew that trouble would come knocking on his door should others learn that he had stumbled upon Kong Shi's silhouette. Or perhaps, trouble might have already been at his doorstep, so he decisively chose to conceal the secret beneath a layer of clouds. Nevertheless, it still did not stop tragedy from befalling him, Zhang Xian deduced. Having undergone 4 celestial master-teacher acknowledgements, it did not take long for him to connect the dots and make sense of the situation. It was a mystery why Kong Shi's silhouette had abruptly appeared in the mountain, but without a doubt, it was bound to be something huge. After all, Kong Shi was the world's teacher. All that was associated with him was anything but ordinary. If news leaked to those with malicious intentions, it could very well spell a calamity. As an 8-star painter, a leaving aperture realm expert, it was impossible for the sorrowless old man to not know this fact. But ultimately, this was still a masterpiece beneath his brush, and he could not bring himself to destroy it. He had hesitated for 30 years before he eventually decided to seal away a portion of the painting. However, that did not stop death from creeping upon him. If Kong Shi's silhouette has appeared in this land, it is very likely that there is a hidden ancient domain similar to the Qiu Wu Palace located in this area. Let me take a closer look. Having thought things through, Zhang Xian quickly made his way toward Kong Shi's silhouette. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.